ideas in science. Deepen your connection to nature, to the stars, and to each other. Learn to see the world differently. The connected universe. Do we truly see the universe when we open our eyes? Do we see the vast potential that's inside of us? First came fire, then came steel. And it wasn't long before we started asking some big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Some of the greatest minds in our history, Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, Rumi, Leonardo da Vinci, Michael Faraday, Max Planck, Nikola Tesla, and Albert Einstein all start to explore the big questions of life and our universe. Their collective work points to something very important, that we might be far more interconnected than anyone had ever thought. Their ideas were way ahead of their time, so they left hidden messages for others to find later, because in their day they could only share their knowledge with a few people. We live in an age where we can communicate to every point on the globe. We are all connected. But it's more than just a feeling. It's also a mathematical equation. But the idea that we are all connected sounds like a platitude to many of us. We're more disconnected than ever in certain ways. War, violence, greed, tragedies. These are the stories that fill the news channels, and this is a very disconnected view of the world. Us against them, you against me, danger and disaster lurking around every corner. But are we complicit in it? Because this is what so many people seem compelled to watch, drawn to the worst aspects of humanity. And then there's the ever-increasing pace. Why do we race through life so quickly, taking in disconnected message fragments with no voice, heart, or context? When we consume bite-sized pieces of information, it's very hard to imagine the big picture. Why does our world seem so frantic? Why do we spend so much of our time chasing money, career, intimacy, and possessions? With schedules so full, when all we really want is simply to be together. For all of our progress, we've lost connection to the one thing that really matters. We remain disconnected while pretending to be connected. And being connected at a distance makes it easier for some people to say hurtful things. We have trouble staying connected to the ones we love, let alone the rest of humanity. There is fear, and there is beauty. Which world do we want? how we connect with the world changes our experience of the world. There is hidden mathematics that underlies all of creation. Nassim Haramein believes the world is profoundly connected. Our universe is filled with mystery. Our planets, stars, and galaxies account for only 4.9% of the matter of the universe. So what makes up the rest of the universe? Is it dark matter? Is it dark energy? There is a large amount of unexplained energy in our universe. In 1992, the NASA Cosmic Background Explorer detected fluctuations in the background energy of the universe. To explore this mystery, we need to remember the words of Nikola Tesla. If you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. There is a flow of the energy of the universe around you and a flow of the energy of the universe inside of you.
When people realize that everything is connected, this sense of separation, this sense that we're isolated, hopefully that goes away and it's replaced with this feeling that we're part of this incredible creation in which everything is interdependent on everything else. And that everything is connected through this energy that's in the space. And then actually it's the space that creates matter and reality and them. They're part of the whole thing. And so that they can see the incredible potential that they have, the incredible miracle that it is that they're alive and that they're able to experience this interconnectivity with everything. It's a feeling of resonance and a feeling of connection with everything in the natural world. And maybe, just maybe, as a result of understanding this at a deeper level, they will start to understand themselves at a deeper level and understand the functioning of the universe at a deeper level, and that it will give hope to people.
Could there be a scientific basis to the way we are all connected? Albert Einstein changed the world with one equation. Yet he knew that his greatest work, to create a single unified theory of the universe, was never finished. Einstein knew how important it would be to humanity if this could be discovered, and he kept searching for answers. But before he could solve it, he ran out of time. Others have built on the work of Albert Einstein in the search for a unified theory of everything. Some people have a knowingness of this connection between the macro and the micro. In the past, we've created mythology around it. But what if we could understand it through the lens of science? Nassim Haramein has been exploring how everything is contained in everything else. The exploration of the universe through mathematics and physics has been complex. Yet from this complexity emerges simplicity. What if there is a way of proving that everything is connected and one at the same time? To understand this, we must take a journey, and our journey begins with the proton. If you remember back to your high school science class, atoms are everywhere and the protons are at the center of every atom. Therefore, we must accurately understand the proton if we're going to understand the universe. New measurements of the proton suggest we must change our existing way of thinking. Nassim Haramein was the first person to have accurately predicted the new measurement of the charge radius of the proton. The proton could hold the key to a scientific understanding of how the connection of the universe actually works. 1905. Einstein demonstrated through an example of a person traveling on a train the theory of relativity. He unified the separate camps of energy and mass with his famous formula. But later, a great divide in physics occurred when Niels Bohr and a group of physicists split off to explore quantum mechanics. They saw two worlds, a quantum world that describes the probabilities and the uncertainties of the very small, and the separate mathematics for the larger universe. Creating this division led to a very disconnected way of thinking. Nassim Haramein, the Director of Research for the Resonance Science Foundation, has been on a lifelong search to discover a unified theory of everything.
My passion for learning never subsided. As soon as I left school, I got more passionate than ever about understanding the universe, studying physics and mathematics and so on, to try to describe it better and eventually to write a unified view of physics. To me, it was critical that we understood the source of reality. We come here and we experience this life, and most people don't ask, like, how did I get here? What is this life? How am I moving billions and trillions of atoms around? I was exploring all this for my own personal satisfaction. It really wasn't to get a master's degrees or a PhD in some institution. I knew that if I went to the institution, I felt I was going to be restricted. I knew I was going to be given very specific concept that I would have to go with. I didn't want that. I wanted to be completely free to think what I wanted to think as I explored. It led me down a very specific road. Certainly some of the things I thought turned out to be wrong, but eventually I started to home in on the stuff that worked together, and I found something, I think, very fundamental and very profound.
To understand how everything is unified, Nassim had to study nature. He had to look at patterns. He looked at the macro and the micro. He started asking questions about some of the fundamental principles science has taken for granted, and started to wonder if, somewhere, we went off on the wrong track. As he continued his journey, he began to understand that in order to see how everything is connected, we had to look at everything.
Everything we experience as reality is actually made up of 99.99999% space. The little part that's not space, or the little part we define as something, the material world, is actually just a little oscillation, a little electromagnetic boundary that we are bumping against, and we call that our reality. We call that a stone, an atom, we call that the water, the sand, or a star, a galaxy. And so maybe instead of looking at matter defining the space, I start to think maybe it's space that defines matter.
It is fascinating to realize that if you remove the empty space in every atom of every human being on the planet and compress it all together, all of humanity would fit into the size of a sugar cube. Granted, it would have the density of a neutron star and weigh approximately 478 million tons, but this helps us to visualize the importance of understanding that every one of us are made of mostly empty space. But as it turns out, that space is not empty.
It was found that space-time at the quantum level is fluctuating with intense energy level, full of dynamic energy components.
We are not only talking about the space outside of our planet, we are talking about the space inside. Each and every atom of your body, every single human on this planet has this in common. Regardless of race, color, or religion, we are all individual beings, yet this dynamic energy of the universe is constantly flowing through all of the space inside each one of our atoms, connecting us all. This helps us understand the profound quote of the Sufi poet Rumi, who said, "You are not a drop of water in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." You can literally feel the force of the universe inside you and flowing through you, connecting you to everything, because you are a part of everything through this dynamic energy. The great theoretical physicist John Archibald Wheeler, a colleague of Einstein, said, "No point is more central than this, that empty space is not empty. It is the seat of the most violent physics." The theoretical physicist David Bohm explained, "Space is not empty. The universe is not separate from this cosmic sea of energy." And Albert Einstein said, "Physical objects are not in space, but these objects are spatially extended as fields. In this way, the concept of empty space loses its meaning." This underlying background energy that exists everywhere in space is described in physics as the vacuum. What if there was a way to connect to this vacuum energy rather than depleting our natural resources? Humanity is on a course that's unsustainable.
For millions of years, magnetic fields have been around us without us knowing about them, until Faraday figured out that by moving a little magnet across a set of wires, we could get an electric power source that could power all of the devices we use today in our society. Now we are discovering there is another invisible field at the source of the material world that is all around us and in large quantities. And by learning how to tap into its structure, we could power our world for generations to come.
Scientists from around the world are looking for a solution to tap the vacuum energy that is all around us. And it is important that they succeed. Current wars and potential conflicts of the future will be fought over resources like oil and water. Abundant energy will help create stability in the world and reduce the threats of the perceived energy supply disruptions that cause countries to go to war. War has been a big part of humanity's past. But does it need to be a big part of humanity's future? War has brought untold sorrow and suffering to mankind, and it is perhaps the strongest example of what can happen when we become so disconnected. Gandhi said, "An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind." With our modern capacity to wage war, there can be no victors. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, once said, "The strength of a civilization is not measured by its ability to fight wars, but rather by its ability to prevent them." Learning how to harness this vacuum energy all around us could have profound implications, but it will require a paradigm shift. Some of the greatest advances in science have come from people with the courage to pursue ideas that challenge the accepted wisdom of the time. It was common for these new ideas to meet with rejection at first. Galileo was imprisoned. People resisted Faraday because he had limited formal education. And do you know what happened when Einstein published his great works in 1905? Nothing happened. People didn't connect to his ideas. The only person who really saw what Einstein had done was Max Planck, who would become the father of quantum theory.
Pursuing an independent path outside the academic world has been extremely difficult. It has been painful in many circumstances. The feeling of continuously being rejected, of not being understood, the constant interaction of fighting preconceived ideas has been a long road. However, it has forced me to be more accurate, to continue digging deeper, and to be extremely careful about my calculations and how I bring them into the world. So it has served a certain purpose.
Our material world is not as solid as it appears at the quantum level. As Tesla put forth nearly a century ago, we need to think of the universe as energy, frequency, and vibration, not as solid physical forms.
We're not dealing with little billiard balls. We're dealing with waveforms, oscillations in the vacuum. Just like when we throw rocks into a pond and the rings come out, the rings can intersect and it doesn't destroy the waveform of one of the rings or the other. The two just intersect. And so that the spheres, the little vibrations of the vacuum are intersecting, and it is the holographic structure of space-time itself. It is the interference pattern that encodes the information of the whole universe in every point.
The idea of a holographic universe was first put forward by physicist David Bohm, advanced by Gerard 't Hooft, then later expanded by Leonard Susskind. It was inspired by new understandings of black hole thermodynamics, that the information of the black hole is present on the 2D surface of the black hole, known as its event horizon. A simple example is that if you throw a wallet into a black hole, as the wallet is being consumed by the black hole, all the information contained in the wallet would become present on the surface of the black hole, because it is a rule of the universe that matter cannot be created or destroyed. Holograms are created using lasers to capture and encode the information of an object in the form of an interference pattern. The light reflected from the object is combined with that of a reference beam to create an interference pattern which can be retained on a photosensitive surface, creating a complete image that can be viewed in its entirety from all angles. The information of the whole is present at every point. When the hologram is cut in half, the complete image is present on both pieces. When it is cut again and again, every piece still contains the representation of the whole image. It is not the actual object, but a representation of the actual object in every piece. Nassim Haramein believes that the representation of the universe is encoded by the interference pattern of the fluctuation of space-time on the surface of every proton. The difference from the static hologram example is that the holographic information encoding is dynamically happening at every microsecond at every moment, and it is constantly flowing throughout the universe.
We often hear the sentence or the concept, everything is connected, it's all one. We hear that from even masters in ancient civilization or modern thinkers, philosophers, spiritual people. And it's a great concept. For many people, it resonates as something true, but how is that true? Some of the work I've been doing starts to open the door to understanding the dynamics and the mechanics on how everything is connected, so that it's no longer just a dogma or an idea, but it's actually based on the physics of reality. When I look carefully at the natural world, I found high level of coherency, high level of geometry, and as well this interconnectivity, this interdependency of all things with other things. The whole system functions together in a balanced way. And I started to wonder, what is the source of this self-organizing system?
What do you see? It depends on how you look. You could scan around an object and study it. Then you could look more closely using a microscope to isolate each part. In this instance, you would see millions of fibers and could spend a long time studying them. When you look too closely, you only see part of the picture. It is when you pull back that you see the part each fiber plays and how it is related to the others, and then the bigger pattern emerges. Imagine the new understandings we will gain if we could all learn to think differently and to look at our world through a big picture, connected perspective. Einstein believed that geometry was a key in the search to understanding the unity of the universe because it represents the relationship between things. Great thinkers came to discover the underlying geometry of nature, such as the golden ratio and the Fibonacci sequence, in many different forms of life. When Nassim Haramein analyzed these geometric relationships in a changing three-dimensional space over time, he saw the 1 to 1.618 ratio appearing, known as the golden ratio, or phi ratio, as a fundamental part of the structure of space-time. Leonardo da Vinci encoded this in his famous work, The Vitruvian Man, showing that the phi ratio exists in different proportions throughout our bodies, and it's not just in humans. It is in animals, in plants, and in art. Geometric symmetry even affects our perception of beauty.
Spending time in nature teaches us that everything is interconnected and everything is interdependent on each other. We have a tendency to isolate systems and then analyze them as if they were not in relationship with anything else in the universe, so that Many of our laws of physics starts with the statement within an isolated system. But then if you look up isolated system in a physics dictionary, you find that no such thing has ever been found. That is, nothing can be isolated completely from everything else in the universe. Gravitational fields cannot be isolated, electromagnetic fields, and so on. So we need to write science that takes account of the relationship of all things with each other. And I think if we want to find the fundamental principles of creation, we have to experience nature from an experiential base. And then the mathematics should come together simply and show beautiful results. It's too easy for scientists to get into the laboratory and just keep trying to work out the theory and lose contact with the natural world. When I'm out there surfing, I'm actually constantly being connected to these fundamental patterns of nature. The particles going up and down in the wave, the energy wave pushing me through the ocean, getting inside a barrel, the big vortex, and the dynamics of the vortex. There is something very profound about that. Many of these things inspire me when I go back in the laboratory and start writing formulas. It's like it's in my cellular memory then.
For many of us in cities, nature is but a faint memory. We are overrun by our technology. We give such importance to our digital reality that we sometimes ignore our physical reality at great peril. And it takes up so much bandwidth, affecting our performance and our well-being. We've let the noise of technology drown out our inner voice, which Nassim believes is the source of inspiration. We need to occasionally disconnect in order to reconnect.
Some of the most beautiful times of my life were times where I was extremely isolated. So at that time, I was coming up to Whistler, Canada. More and more the interest I had in nature and physics and understanding the basis of reality was kind of taking over my interest. So I moved into a van to continue my research. I knew that if I could tough it out, minimize my expenses, I could get enough resources so that I could continue to work full-time, doing research, trying to find some clues as to how I could unify the forces of physics. And I was in this amazing research zone where information was just flowing through, and I was researching, I was finding more and more information, and the pieces of the puzzles were coming together, and moments after moments of illumination. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, one after the other, and it was just so beautiful. It was the most transformative experiences of my life. And most of the physics I wrote here. Of course, it took me some 25 years to flush out the math for it, but I knew I was onto something very early on. I was learning advanced physics, and I was coming to very specific conclusions, and then I was decoding ancient texts and ancient traditions that were completely confirming what I was coming up with in advanced physics, and how the world comes to be and how the material structure exists. And many of these civilizations where these ancient symbols were present had numerous, thousands of different, very strange anomalies. Some of the things that are found around the world are not even reproducible with all the technology we have today. I felt that in these symbols, in these secret geometry, that these pointed to very fundamental understanding of the structure of space, of how matter is created, and how gravitational field can be controlled. It was my intent that the theoretical studies I was making would eventually lead to advanced technologies that would allow us to control gravitational field and electromagnetic field in such a way that it could transform our civilization.
Many in the Western world misunderstood the teachings of the Mayan culture and thought December 21st, 2012 was going to be the end of the world. However, the Mayan elders have said directly December 21st, 2012 wasn't the end of the world. It was just the end of the old cycle. Now we have the chance for a new beginning, a new era of connection, new understanding, and interestingly, on that day, December 21st, the end of the Mayan calendar, Nassim Haramein sent his paper to the Library of Congress, which for the first time ever connected quantum and cosmological physics.
And the result of my equation was the exact gravitational mass of the black hole. That is, if I solve Einstein field equation to figure out the mass of a black hole, I would get the exact same result. So all of a sudden, I knew from the beginning of this exploration that I found something profound. If space is what's connecting everything, if space is what everything emerged from and returned to, then space is the great organizer. Space is the thing that connects all things, that gathers the information of all knowledge of every point in space. If we look at all the little fluctuations of the vacuum, the amount of energy inside the proton, in the vacuum fluctuation, the mass of the vacuum inside the little teeny proton in the center of an atom is equivalent to all the other protons' mass in the universe. That is, all the rest of the matter in the universe is represented holographically by the vacuum fluctuation inside one little proton, so that one little proton is connected to all other protons in the universe.
Nassim's calculations seem to present evidence that our universe is holographic in nature. Another big question in our effort to understand the nature of things: is the universe random? Think of the amazing biodiversity of our planet, of all the living things. We live in a wondrous world. Think of the complexity of a chimpanzee. Consider a jellyfish, or a blade of grass, or something less complex, something not alive, a simple Rubik's Cube. 3 rows, 3 columns, 3 deep, with 6 colors. What is the mathematical probability of solving that by random chance? 13.8 billion years is the current estimate of the age of the universe. If you could send a blind person back in time with a scrambled Rubik's Cube, and they could make one move every second, how long do you think it would take them to solve it? In the 13.8 billion years of the existence of our universe, you would have less than a 1% chance of solving it. So how much longer would it take to ensure that you would solve it? There are 43 quintillion possible states for the Rubik's Cube. To move through every possible state without ever repeating the same one, it would take 1.4 trillion years. And you would have possibly solved it at some point. But it could have taken billions and billions of years longer than the existence of our universe to solve a simple Rubik's Cube by random chance. Now imagine the incredible complexity of a human being with 100 trillion cells that are communicating every millisecond to ensure all systems are go. Imagine all the moving parts, all the possibilities. How long would it take to organize that? Because we are so vastly more complex than a Rubik's Cube. Yet humanity exists. So how can this be possible? What if we could tell the blind person something?
If we give just one little piece of information, yes, you're going towards the solution, or no, you're going away from the solution, then within a few minutes, the Rubik's Cube would be ordered. So from billions and billions of years to a few minutes with one simple feedback of information, that gives us a clue about the probabilities of how the biodiversity and the structure of cellular systems and all of our complexity that occur could have come to be with one simple feedback in the structure of space itself.
Our universe cannot be purely random. There must be a feedback mechanism in the flow of the universe. Further evidence that this must be happening can be seen in fractal mathematics. For thousands of years, traditional mathematics mostly described man-made objects and motion. It could describe a pyramid or a column, but for living objects like a flower or a tree, you need fractal mathematics. Fractal mathematics are the underlying patterns that build the natural world. The great mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot created computer programs that used fractal mathematics to render complex forms. When Hollywood wants to create a whole new world in a science fiction film, a new planet, new plants, and new life forms, they use animation based on fractal mathematics to create a complexity of the natural world. To describe nature using math, you also need a feedback loop called iterations. If you start with a simple form, then iterate the formula, which means the formula feeds back on itself. You can see the complexity grow with each iteration. It is fascinating and beautiful to watch. When you make tiny adjustments to the formula or to the base form, you can create vastly different results. The possibilities seem virtually limitless. Witnessing this incredible variety and complexity helps to understand the vital role that the feedback mechanism plays in our universe.
What is consciousness? What is the experience of being self-aware? In order for such thing to occur, there must be a feedback of information. For instance, you looking at yourself in the mirror, knowing it's you. What if consciousness is actually a function of how space feedbacks on itself, which would be a dynamic that could generate self-awareness? Us feeding information to the structure of space-time, and space-time feeding information back in terms of our experience every day. This feedback mechanism could be the source of the self-organizing system that we see all around us at the biological level, and eventually becoming self-aware or conscious. This being the very extension of space-time, looking back at itself and learning about itself.
Starting out in the world, when we first gain consciousness, we learn to take in information from all around us, from parents, from books, And now from technology. We are living in a time of information overload, and we are being bombarded by messages from everywhere. We have almost infinite choices of what messages we consume. It matters a great deal what you focus on. We know the universe has a feedback loop, and our brains have a feedback loop as well. Our thoughts are not only imprinted on the universe, they also deeply affect how we experience the world. The gift of being conscious is the ability to feel the wonderful moments of life. And it also means that we feel the painful moments. As you get older, you realize that good times don't last forever, and neither do the bad times. Because our brains have a remarkable ability to adapt. We can learn to shift our focus, to change our experience by changing what we put into our feedback loop. Gratitude and positive thoughts can build on each other, creating an upward spiral by connecting to your friends and to nature. You have the power of the universe inside of you, and you can overcome anything in life. Remember the age-old words, this too shall pass. As an individual, you put your thoughts and intentions out into the universe. And through the feedback mechanism of the universe, the collective energy of everything flows back into you. You are in a constant cosmic dance with the universe. The great poet Rumi said, "Stop being so small. You are the universe in ecstatic motion." As individuals, we are powerful, but we have even greater power when we dance together, when we collectively focus our energy, when we share and focus the flow. The flow of energy is real and we can feel it. Some people have learned to connect in their inner journey through yoga and through meditation. Some people's only experience of this is cheering at a major sporting event with tens of thousands of other fans, cheering for a common goal, which is enjoyable, but it is capable of being so much more. Humanity is able to accomplish amazing things if we come together on a global scale to create positive change and elevate our collective evolution. You matter in the universe. You are part of the cosmic flow.
I think that every person is an incredible miracle, and every person is critical to our evolution.
Your body is an incredible example of interconnection and synergy. All the systems working together without even a conscious thought, in concert with your brain. Your brain may be one of the most amazing things we know about in the universe. It's doing billions of operations per second and doing everything it can to keep you alive. If you take a moment to connect to your body and appreciate all the invisible processes it does for you, it heals your cuts, helps fight disease, gives you energy. What if you stop being judgmental about the appearance of your body and choose to love your body for the incredible miracle that it is? How do you think your life would change? Your body is the vessel by which you experience the world and the universe, and it allows you to be part of the cosmic flow.
people understood the miracle that they are, they would never be down on themselves. They would never feel like they are, you know, less of. They would realize that they're part of an incredible will work of nature that they have access to, and that they have power in this universe. They can do things, they can transform things, they can transform themselves, and as a result, transform the universe.
The famous mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot proved that the smaller the unit of measurement that you use, the more accurate your final result. This is important to the work of Nassim Haramein because he uses the Planck units, the smallest unit of measurement available in the universe, in his calculations, which leads to an unprecedented level of accuracy. So, how incredibly small is the Planck unit?
In order to give you a conceptual notion of the relationship in size between the Planck and the proton size, if the Planck was a little grain of sand, then the proton would be the size of the distance between the Earth and Alpha Centaurus, an enormous bubble that spans large amount of space, some 4 light years across.
And then fill it with grains of sand. That's how many Planck units are in the proton. Imagine every grain of sand on the Earth would just be the tiniest speck of the number of Planck units on a proton. Not only does this show how small the Planck unit is, but it also shows how many Planck units fit in a proton. Haramein calculated that all the little Planck pixels add up to all the information of all the other protons in the universe, and that the fluctuation of the Planck oscillators creates the information network that the universe uses to get constant feedback. Einstein was fascinated with light and how it worked. His famous thought experiments would lead to several counterintuitive ideas that would forever change our world. One of those ideas was his theory of relativity. Einstein's general theory of relativity explained gravity as a consequence of the curvature of space-time created by the presence of mass and energy, and that space-time could be calculated through geometry. It literally acts like a fabric that stretches and bends. When you put lighter objects near a heavier one, they spin in the gravity well created by the large object. Einstein saw the fabric of space-time and gravity as continuous. Haramein sees the fabric quantized with a sea of almost infinitely small Planck pixels. So it behaves like Einstein's fabric on a cosmological scale, but the big breakthrough is that because it is made of tiny quantized Planck pixels, it allows for the forces of spin and gravity to be accounted for by Haramein's geometry at the quantum level. If you think of the water in a perfectly still kitchen sink, it could look like a single sheet of water. But if you pull the drain, the water spins around the drain while the rest of the surface is perfectly flat. This is how Haramein's work gets results like Einstein's single sheet. Yet because the water is really tiny individual drops, It allows for spin to be present at the quantum level. The other difference is that we can't think of it as a single sheet. Think instead of it being stacked infinitely high and infinitely low, infinitely right and infinitely left, in a giant Planck pixel soup that fills the universe, allowing spin to occur anywhere.
Einstein geometrized space-time at the cosmological level, and until he died, he believed that there were gonna be a solution to do the same at the quantum level. So I was very much inspired by that.
As Einstein was fascinated by light, Haramain is relentlessly fascinated by the forces of spin.
Everything in the universe has spin. And I came to conclude eventually that the fundamental torque that produces the spin comes directly out of changes in density in the structure of space itself. Just like a little change in density between hot air and cold air produces a hurricane, which, if you look carefully, looks a lot like a galaxy. The same forces are generated in the structure of space itself because of a gradient or a change in the density of the energy of space. The structure of spin is critical to our understanding of the dynamics of the universe.
Think about all the ways we are spinning. The Earth spins at about 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. The Earth spins around the Sun at about 67,000 miles per hour. The Sun, with our solar system, is spinning around the galaxy at 515,000 miles per hour. The galaxy is moving through the universe at approximately 1.3 million miles per hour. Our DNA expresses spin. Atoms spin, protons spin, everything in the universe spins. Spin may be the one thing that connects us all. We are living in a universe where everything inside of it spins. Seeing the interconnection of all spinning things made Haramain look at gravity in a different way. Gravity is one of the most mysterious forces in the cosmos, which is why so few quantum models include gravity. This is part of the reason for the disconnect between the quantum world and the cosmological world. Haramain asked the question, where is the best place in the universe to observe the most intense interaction of the forces of spin and the force of gravity? The answer? The edge of a black hole. Haramain has studied the possible connection between the forces of spin and the forces of gravity being intertwined at a quantum level.
The spin dynamics of the structure of space-time itself is what produces what we call the black hole. And this new equation proves that. It proves that it's the Planck fluctuations that produces the effect. The black hole is actually the result of the little Planck's vacuum oscillations dynamically, collectively organizing.
From this new perspective, we start to see galaxies in a new way. Haramain's theory predicts that there may be a supermassive black hole at the center of every galaxy.
It would be almost like spinning a coffee in the morning, where the coffee is completely black, a very dark black coffee, and you can't actually see the spin very well. But as soon as you put the cream in the coffee, all of a sudden the spin appears. Like the stars and the dust and the electromagnetic radiation in a galaxy makes the spin that's already present in the vacuum apparent to us. And we go, oh, look, there's a galaxy with a black hole in the middle, where the black hole and the structure, the spinning galaxy, are actually present prior to us being able to see it.
universal black holes, these huge giants in the middle of galaxies and quasars and so on, are actually the same dynamics inside a teeny object we call an atom. And that when we're looking at a proton or the nucleus of an atom, we're looking at the same structure, the same dynamics of black hole, but in a very teeny object.
Leonard Susskind, the director of the Stanford Institute for Theoretical Physics, who is best known for having won the black hole war with Stephen Hawking on the information paradox, stated in a mini-lecture series that there is no sharp separation between particles and black holes. Many physicists, including Leonard Susskind, are independently exploring new understandings of black holes. Hadamein's proposed connection between the black hole forces and protons could prove highly significant.
We're made out of these objects. We're made out of protons and atoms and molecules and all this, and so it would stand to reason that the same kind of dynamics should be found even at the biological level. And that is what creation is. It actually emerges from the vacuum through the black hole structure into our reality.
New studies have shown that the spin rate near the surface of black holes seems to be very high. They spin close to the speed of light. His theories from 20 years ago predicted that result.
These are all components that tells us that the black holes are not the result of the material world, but maybe that the material world is the result of the dynamics of black holes.
Information and energy flow throughout the universe. For many people, the science of the interconnection of the protons is exciting because it resonates with the feeling of the connection of life. We feel the connection of life very deeply with our loved ones, our families, our pets, with the animals, with the amazing flow of nature and our connection to the natural world. Since our earliest beginnings, humanity has depended on the sun and the stars for food and navigation. The drive to understand the forces of nature at work in our world has pushed humanity ever forward. For millennia, humans have looked at birds and dreamed of flying. But for most of human history, flight was considered impossible. What is the next great advance in flight?
The structure of space-time is all around us. Imagine if we can learn to influence these structures so that we can control them and make them work for us. Gravity is a result of these little fluctuations in the structure of the vacuum. And by controlling those, by influencing those, we could be able to levitate things. Some incredible possibilities open as soon as we understand these fundamental mechanics of gravity and learn to control them and influence them. There's over 50,000 flights a day. Imagine if all these flights didn't require fossil fuels. Imagine the positive environmental impact this would have on our society. However, in order for us to evolve to a society that's able to fly maybe through its solar system or even through its galaxy, our technology, our understanding of the forces of nature, such as gravity, have to go to a deeper level.
The helicopters behind me produce massive amount of lift by creating these small pressure differential and generating vortices in the structure of the air. Now imagine what we could do if we could create the same type of depression or the same type of gradient change in the structure of the fluctuations of the vacuum itself. The space would curve and generate what Einstein described as gravity in space-time curvature. By doing so, we could control the gravitational field. Is it possible to create a gradient in the structure of the vacuum itself? We already do this with the Casimir effect, where we create a little gradient between the two plates that forces the plates to get pushed together.
And now we've succeeded in doing what's called the dynamical Casimir effect, where actually instead of using plates, we're using little semiconductor mirrors, and we're able to oscillate them really fast, and as a result we're able to like pop little photons right out of the vacuum. So we're actually already extracting little bit of energy directly out of the vacuum.
This opens incredible possibilities. Tapping into the network of the structure of space leads to space travel across very large distances and so on.
We have already sent probes past Pluto and out of our solar system, and Hubble has peered into the unimaginably vast reaches of space. And we have come to realize that we are connected to it all. Your connection with the universe began long before you were born. Did you know that the atoms and elements of your body were forged in the hearts of stars? Carbon, nitrogen, iron, and then when that star exploded, they were spread throughout the universe. The atoms in your foot may come from a different star than the atoms in your hand, and different from the ones in your heart. We are connected to the stars in a profound way, literally made of stardust. Individual examples of a living, connected universe. Our mountains have watched humanity rise. Yet, what have we risen to? Are we at our best? Are we capable of so much more? Imagine if we open our eyes to new ideas, the heights to which we could rise, and make that journey for ourselves and for all of humanity. Because we are all one. It has been a long road to get to the place where we truly understand the concept, as above, so below, as within, so without. And that the forces of black holes are present in something as small as a proton. This changes the way we see the unity of our world. As the dreams of our future take flight, this becomes an equation for a more connected humanity. Einstein believed that a unified equation should be beautiful in its simplicity, containing no free parameters. This is Nassim Haramein's equation. It contains no free parameters, and it solves for mass and gravity, both at the cosmological and quantum scale, with simple geometry and algebra.
I took the radius, I calculated the surface, I calculated the volume, and then I divided by the little Planck spheres to figure out how many is inside and how many is outside. So that the outside was denoted as eta,
in our paper and the inside as capital R. And then I just did R over eta. I just looked at the relationship of the inside information to the surface horizon information. And I got a ratio. And eventually, I multiplied that ratio by a mass, the Planck mass. And the result of my equation was the exact gravitational mass of the black hole, just by basically pixelating the inside and the outside of the black hole and looking at their relationship. So all of a sudden, I was getting a solution to gravity, the solution to Einstein field equation, a solution that is based on holography, but not only that, a solution that's based on little Planck pixel, so that it was quantized.
Einstein said we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. Creating this bridge to unify the great divide in physics is an important step forward in advancing a more connected view of physics.
So in the paper that I wrote and I sent to the Library of Congress for copywriting in December 2012, I make this little prediction that the radius of the proton should be exactly this value. And I state in the paper that more precise measurement in the future may confirm this theoretical result. I started to work on getting the paper published and sending it to colleagues around the world. I was getting very good reviews on it from very advanced physicists. And then all of a sudden, a paper was published.
On January 25, 2013, a new muonic measurement of the charge radius of the proton confirmed Haramain's predicted value. The experimental results were not what the quantum world wanted to hear.
The measurement came in at 4% smaller than what was expected by the standard model. And so it was very difficult for the scientific community to accept this measurement.
Nassim, you're on Yahoo Finance News. What do you think about that?
Oh my God.
PBS.news.
Changing the paradigm as we talk. History in the making.
New connected universe theory offers an alternative explanation of gravity and mass, revealing potential new source of energy. That's big. Look, it's in the middle of the day. I mean, the night.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's really awesome.
Oh my God. It's incredible. The wire went out, and within minutes it was picked up by some of the largest networks and media on the planet. And it's already across the world. India, Germany, Europe is coming online. The East Coast will in the next few hours, I'm sure. I just feel like, okay, we're making a significant difference now. We're really kind of birthing a new paradigm, a new moment in the history of science and the history of understanding of the universe on the planet. Some 30 years I've been visualizing this moment where my work would appear on major news feeds all around the world.
I mean, we got a lot of pickup on this news release.
Today's the day. And it's kind of strange. It's a strange feeling. It's like, oh my God, it actually happened. And, you know, it seems like a day like any other day. But this is the day that it happened. And this could very well be the day that science changed forever.
But so far, it hasn't been the day that science changed forever. Looking back through history and physics, this is a pattern that has been repeated time after time after time. Someone comes up with an idea that later will become standard, but at the time, nothing happens. And sometimes there is massive criticism about the idea because it's a different way of thinking. We are only now discovering some of the unpublished works of Sir Isaac Newton. He didn't share all of his work because it went against the religious dogmas of his time. It's a little bit like steering a large ship. The wheel gets turned, but there's no immediate change of direction. In the world of physics, it can take years. After he first published his paper, Haramain was invited to share his knowledge with one of the largest laboratories in the world. However, when the administration found out about it, that invitation was cancelled because they were focused on looking for a solution in a different way. After 30 years of work, believing that this would be his moment, history is again being repeated, that potentially a big leap forward in our understanding is not being recognized.
What I'm most afraid of is that the world will misinterpret what I say, misinterpret who I am, and continue on their self-destructive path they are on today. And that this incredible opportunity in our civilization we've had to grow and to evolve to a galactic community will be missed. I hope to be able to inspire people to think differently, to not be afraid to be who they are, and not to take everything they've taught in the school or in the media or anywhere else just as a given, but actually to question what is being said and the validity of it, and to do it in a way that is constructive and that leads to higher understanding and higher levels of creativity. And I hope that my path and all this exploration I've done can inspire people.
Science doesn't always change overnight. The Greeks theorized about the existence of atoms 2,000 years before we could actually detect one. The cover of Scientific American states in huge bold letters, "The proton problem. Could scientists be seeing signs of a whole new realm of physics?" For physicists, the measurement of the charge radius of the proton is fundamentally important to the understanding of our universe. When the first measurement came out in 2010, it was significantly different than the standard scientific thinking of the day allowed. They said there must be a mistake, that there must have been an error. So when a new measurement was done using heavier muonic particles which would allow for even greater accuracy, the results were even more shocking.
And so immediately I purchased the paper confirming the correct radius for the proton and that no errors were found in the earlier experiments. And so I took that number, I plugged it into my equation, and it outputted something remarkable. I was so excited to find that now my prediction is within one standard deviation of their data. And so evidence is supporting that actually our theoretical result might be the exact radius of the proton, and experiments are slowly creeping towards it, confirming the theory very strongly.
Standard thinking says that there are 4 fundamental forces in the universe: gravity, electromagnetism, the strong force, and the weak force. But the strong force and the weak force were theorized before we understood about black holes.
From my study of black holes and scaling laws of black hole structures in the universe, I found that the proton, or the nucleus of an atom, could act as a mini black hole.
If you describe the little proton as a black hole, all of a sudden you calculate the gravitational force of two of these little black holes attracting each other, you get the exact force that we call the strong force that holds the nuclei together. Exactly. Not like approximately, but exactly. The strong force, that force that we actually invented out of nowhere because we didn't know how the protons held together, because they're positively charged, right? They're supposed to repel. So when we discovered that, we invented a force to force them to be together. And we said gravity is too weak to do the job. So we invented a new force. And since then, we can't get gravity and the strong force to like be nice to each other. And that's because we invented one of them. Since then, we've ran like supercomputers night and day, billions of dollars of investment in supercomputing power to try to find an analytical solution to the strong force, to LQCD. Zero solution has been found to this day. So maybe it's wrong, bro. Try that.
Because these little protons are spinning very rapidly, when we move them away from each other, this very strong attractive force drops off very rapidly, which is what we call the Yukawa potential.
Out of the geometry emerge an exact solution to the force necessary to keep the protons together. And out of that came out the spin of the protons. And from the spin, I'd extrapolated the range of the gravitational force of protons to one another.
If they were mini black holes, that force would be completely eliminated. We wouldn't need the strong force because we would realize that it's actually the gravitational force acting at the quantum level. So I am able now to account for the strong force with a gravitational force and eliminate some of the largest complexities in quantum theory and reduce the number of fundamental forces in the universe.
What really keeps me going, this amazing transformation I can see when a person realizes that they're connected to everything and that they matter in the universe. We live an imprint as we go in our daily life in the structure of space-time itself, that we're informing the structure of the vacuum, and so that nothing would be the same if we weren't there. We're actually participating in this incredible complex will works of nature, and that the communication of all the things in it is occurring through this imprint that we leave on the structure of space-time as we go along, as we interpret what we see and how we feel. And so we have a responsibility in our interpretation and our feelings and our behaviors in what we are feeding the universe.
So what do you want your imprint to be? You have the power in every moment of every day to choose how you feel and to choose how you show up in the world. Your choices matter in your own life and the lives you affect all around you. We can look at the world through the eyes of a child again, be filled with wonder, imagine, create, explore, and question. Our heart is how we feel all the things we can't see. And when we integrate the power of imagination with the love and strength of our heart, our world will change, bringing hope for a better future. And this requires action. We already know about the feedback loop of the universe that creates reality. But there is also a powerful global technological feedback loop in the form of the internet. We consume content, but we also contribute content. Status updates, pictures, tweets, blogs, and we like, we react, we comment, and we share. This is a perfect example of a feedback loop. We live in an age where we can help each other solve problems like never before. One person has a problem, solves it, posts it, and we can all benefit from it with a few clicks on the web. Scientists from around the world can collaborate remotely and give each other feedback like never before. We are living in the most technologically connected time in history. So what are we going to do with this opportunity? Technology is a double-edged sword, and it can cut both ways. Many people think technology alone holds the key to creating a better future for humanity. But there is more to it than that. It is the consciousness with which we create and wield that technology that will significantly impact our world. And the choice is ours. We can choose to do more than just use technology to understand the mechanics of the heart. We can choose to listen to our heart, to connect to it, to be inspired by it, to learn to follow it, and to learn to use it to the fullest. Our heart is part of our grand connection to the universe. Together, we have the power to raise consciousness globally. We can make kindness go viral. We can actively contribute to creating a world where we focus on the good. We can renew hope, create solutions, and we can share old wisdom and new ideas. It would be hard to explain to someone 40 years ago the incredible impact of the simple connectivity of the internet and how it changed nearly every aspect of our lives. It is hard for a young person today to imagine how the world used to be, because everything is changing so fast. Can you imagine what the future will be like in 20 years? Where will science take us? What will our technology look like? What will we learn when we stand inside a virtual reality proton and observe and interact with 3D visualizations of real-time experimental data?
It's really exciting to see the interest that this new theoretical understanding is bringing. We're collaborating with industry and have now state-of-the-art laboratories to produce technological advancements that are critical for the evolution of our planetary system and our society, including energy production, gravitational control, and all these things. So a lot of incredible things are happening, and we're making great strides in achieving a whole new level of understanding of our universe, ourself in it, and a whole new level of technology to go along with it.
It is estimated that human knowledge took 1,500 years to double for the first time. Then by 1900, it doubled every 100 years. By the 1940s, it doubled every 25 years. And in 2013, it is estimated that it doubled every 13 months. And that time span continues to get shorter. But knowledge alone isn't wisdom. Leonardo da Vinci said, "Learn how to see, realize that everything connects to everything else." From this place of connected understanding, he became very prolific across multiple disciplines, making innovations in science, in anatomy, in biology, in engineering, and in art. Da Vinci and the other great masters have shown us that we no longer need to go through life with blinders on and look at things as separate. We can all learn to expand our vision and see the beauty of the connections that are all around us. And we can build bridges connecting our different disciplines and integrate our knowledge from a higher perspective.
Those very important moments where you read something or you look at a theory that's being propagated by the establishment. You have a choice to accept it as a truth and completely ignore what may be going on inside of you that may be saying something different. Or you might reflect on what you've learned, take what you think may be correct, and maybe see how you could add your view to it to transform it.
For the last 30 years, Nassim Haramein has been willing to ask questions and explore new ideas, and this journey has yielded ever further advances. Now, his work with Dr. Amira Val-Baker has led to being able to extend his holographic mass solution to accurately predict the mass of the electron, the hydrogen Bohr atom, and all the elements of the periodic table that make up our physical reality with an unprecedented level of accuracy, 1 order of magnitude more precise than the standard approach is able to predict. All of these innovations are yet another step closer in helping us to usher in a new era of unified physics. We live in a time of great possibilities. We're all in this world together, and we are stronger together than we are apart. We have the opportunity to unify, to imagine the change we want to see in the world, to advance our collective evolution and advance our approach to science. We can imagine the world from a connected perspective, to see ways to create new ideas in science, health, business, and in living more connected lives. Many people around the world are experiencing a feeling and a knowingness that something incredible is happening, that there is a great shift in consciousness taking place, and that people are awakening to the idea that the disconnected worldview can transition to a more connected way of being. This supports some of the most advanced philosophical and spiritual concepts that we find throughout the ages, from masters that have come and told us that everything is connected and we are all one. They told us that there is this background energy, which is the force that creates stars, planets, and life. Science is showing us that there are infinite possibilities to explore in the vastness of the universe, and you have almost infinite possibilities to explore within yourself. We can create a new future for ourselves, and we can co-create together a positive future for humanity when we explore our connected universe.
To the broiling heat of Earth's closest neighbor, radical weather is the norm in the solar system. We do have our own extremes here on Earth, but they pale in comparison to the fastest, dustiest, wettest, and most brutal alien storms. On Earth, the sun drives our weather, and sometimes drives it wild. When hot and cold collide in the atmosphere, watch out. This is true locally and globally. But storms on other planets are bigger badder and stranger than their counterparts on Earth. Why is that? Because of the sun? If not, what else fuels their fury? The basic laws of nature, the rules of the game, are pretty much the same wherever you go in the solar system. But every planet has its own way of playing the game. Right now on Mars, the entire planet is being covered in dust. This global dust storm blocks 99% of the sun's rays from reaching the planet's surface. It's actually a system of smaller but still massive storms churning dust high into the atmosphere. Once it starts, it takes months for Martian skies to clear.
Mars is just the most dramatic weather in the solar system in some senses. It's very rare in the solar system you get a weather event that can take out the whole planet.
So if the basic rules of hot and cold are the same on Mars, why is the weather so different from Earth? For one thing, Mars is half the size of Earth. It's also 50% further from the sun, so it's much colder. The average temperature on Mars is minus 80 degrees. That's almost 130 degrees colder than Earth. And the atmosphere is extremely thin and composed mostly of carbon dioxide. But perhaps the most important difference is this: Mars is a global desert.
What would Earth be like without water? Well, it'd probably have a lot of dust.
There's no liquid water at the surface of Mars, and there's very little water in the atmosphere, and so there's nothing to sort of keep the dust down.
On Earth, dust storms are localized and short-lived.
The reason for that difference in scale is that the storms are generating their own weather on Mars, whereas on the Earth, they're slave to the weather that's going on around them.
In other words, on Earth, the global weather system creates dust storms. On Mars, the storms create a global weather system. Astronomers have always been able to see big Martian dust storms easily with Earth-based telescopes. But what they couldn't see was what caused them. That would require a trip to Mars itself. In 2003, NASA landed 2 rovers called Spirit and Opportunity on the Martian surface. Their mission? To learn more about the geology of the red planet. NASA engineers always assumed that as these 2 vehicles roamed the Martian surface, dust would build up on their solar panels.
If you have a lot of dust that's falling down out of the atmosphere and coating the panels, pretty soon you're not getting much sun to the silicon. And in fact, we thought that was what was going to kill the rover Spirit and Opportunity.
Only it never happened. The rovers didn't die as expected. As dust built up on the panels, somehow something would clean them off. But how could this be? NASA engineers were baffled until the rovers themselves saw the culprit. Martian dust devils.
It turns out that dust devils were sort of our white knight. They came along and cleaned off the solar panels just at the time when we were expecting to start having some problems.
There are beautiful photos that actually show dust devils moving across the Martian atmosphere, and ghostly soldiers moving out there in the distance.
A dust devil is really an extreme form of rising hot air, or convection.
And that hot air wants to go up, and it comes up just like, water going down a drain. Well, this is air that just spirals up into the colder parts of the atmosphere.
Whenever warmer air, which is less dense, rises up through cooler air, which is more dense, it rotates as it swirls upwards. Convection can be very powerful, strong enough to lift things up. On Earth, it lifts moisture, and that's how thunderstorms form. But on Mars, there is no moisture, so it lifts dry, dark dust and creates giant dust storms instead. Once airborne, Martian dust clouds absorb sunlight and heat the atmosphere. This supercharges the convection, lifting still more dust.
That produces more winds, which bring up more dust, and these things can spread up to thousands of miles across, or even, in some cases, they can envelop the entire planet.
And because the Martian atmosphere is so thin, it doesn't take much to get this cycle going.
You get a lot more difference between the surface temperature and the air temperature, and so the convection on Mars is very much more vigorous.
As a rule, Earth doesn't get the temperature extremes that Mars does. But sometimes, here and there in the deserts of Earth, convection can be very Martian-like. And we get dust devils, too. But at Arizona State University, Lynn Necrace makes dust devils to order in a lab to study them up close. He uses a vortex generator and substitutes lighter, dry ice for dust. What he creates is not an exact replica of how real dust devils form, but good enough to see how they pick up dust and debris.
Natural dust devils usually form from the bottom up, as opposed to tornadoes, which form from top down. So what happens when we turn this on, we have the airflow starting, and as the airflow starts to rotate from the fans down to the floor, we actually end up having the vortex form.
In other words, the vortex generator, basically a huge vacuum cleaner, imitates the swirling action of convection.
You can see here there's a wider base where larger particles of the dry ice are being swept up and gets wrapped up and tightens as it expands upward. The center of the core is where the majority of the lifting would occur.
Martian dust devils have been helpful, keeping the rovers clean. But could they actually be making a mess of the rest of the planet? Some scientists think there are so many at any one time, and they lift so much dust into the atmosphere, that together they trigger these much larger dust storms.
It starts wind patterns, and the air's warmer over here, and it's colder over here, and the air starts moving around. Pretty soon you're spreading dust over the whole planet.
And we found measurements that indicate there's up to maybe 200 dust devils per square mile per day during some parts of the summer.
And they can range from a couple of 100 feet tall to devils that stretch 6 or 7 miles high.
You can get just towering monsters of dust devils that we would never see on the Earth. The kind of maximum size dust devils you see on Mars are more like tornadoes on the Earth, where they're going up almost 10 kilometers. So these things are just real monster systems.
Back at Arizona State University, scientists blow crushed walnut shells as silicate particles in the Planetary Geology Wind Tunnel to replicate dust and wind conditions on Mars.
If we can understand and sort of replicate what's going on, then we can, in a sense, understand how the Martian surface has been changing and continues to change as time goes on.
Oddly enough, their studies reveal that it's easier for winds to loft larger sand particles into the air than smaller dust particles.
This is because there's cohesional forces and static forces between the very small, fine dust grains. We imaged the rover deck and actually found that sand seemed to have bounced onto the solar panels, and we can see the skip marks across the surface. And this is interesting because we don't usually see sand typically reach that high.
Dust devils on Earth never have the punch to produce that kind of chaos here. Lucky for us. But what would happen to Earth if a giant Martian-style dust storm did overtake us?
If you had dust storms of Martian size on the Earth, you would find your city being enveloped in an orange-tan haze.
Air quality plunges as the storm churns. Dust blots out the sun, shutting down photosynthesis. No plants, no food. Temperatures would plummet. 65 million years ago, an asteroid may have struck the Earth, creating these same conditions, wiping out the dinosaurs.
It's not going to happen on the Earth, though, because there's going to be rainfall and moisture condensing on the dust grains and so forth and dropping them out of the atmosphere. So it's very hard for something like that to spread in the climate conditions that we have on Earth.
Forecasting Martian weather may someday be just as important as forecasting the weather on Earth. If we ever want to send a manned mission there,
the word environment no longer really applies just to the meadow next door and the little stream down at the end of town. It's the whole inner solar system. I mean, that's really our environment now.
The sun's energy bathes all the planets. On Earth, it creates hurricanes. On Mars, planet-wide dust storms. But with almost no solar energy, distant Neptune produces violent and powerful winds. Where do they come from? And just how bad are they? If Neptune's winds were to travel to Earth, these alien storms would literally blow us away. The orbit of Neptune lies 3 billion miles from the Sun, at the outer edge of the solar system. There's a lot we don't know about this big blue planet. Neptune's jet stream winds blast as fast as 1,500 miles an hour in its upper atmosphere. But how? The sun controls the weather on Earth and Mars, but it barely reaches out here. No sunlight means freezing temperatures, an average of minus 392 degrees Fahrenheit. So if there's no sun and no heat, where do these incredible winds come from?
Where we have winds converging from various directions, coming from the Ohio River Valley, coming down from the St. Lawrence River Valley, coming up the eastern seaboard, all converging here in this area on top of Mount Washington.
The elevation change from the valley floor to the summit of Mount Washington is very significant for any mountain range. It's over 4,000 feet, so air is forced to go over the mountaintop and forced to squeeze in there, and is accelerated as it's squeezed over the mountaintop.
And they measure it every hour, on the hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
It's blowing over 100 out here right now. Ice is forming on the instruments more quickly. It's time to go up and de-ice the instruments. Even though it's blowing over 100, we got to do it every hour now.
Ironically, Earth's uneven surface, which channels winds into powerful gusts on Mount Washington, ultimately knocks them down over time. And this is the big difference between weather on Earth and weather on Neptune. Earth has mountains that slow winds down. Neptune is as smooth as a cue ball.
It's not so much a question of you're driving them stronger, because you're not. It's just that there's nothing to slow them down.
Simply put, once Neptune's winds get blowing, there's nothing to get in their way. So what would an average Neptune wind speed of 850 miles an hour do to us here on Earth?
We have parking level winds in the Earth sometimes above 100 miles an hour. We consider that pretty dangerous. So if we sat with 900 mile an hour winds from Neptune on the Earth, we would probably start wiping out everything on the surface and scraping everything off.
Giant Neptune takes wind and transforms it into something extreme and almost unrecognizable. But orbiting just beyond the rings of Saturn is a small moon that does the same thing to rain. This is Titan, where an everyday rain shower would turn Earth into an explosive fireball. It's a cloudy day, and a gentle rainstorm starts. Here on Earth, you'd grab your umbrella and consider it a minor inconvenience. But this isn't Earth, and it's no ordinary rain. You're on Titan, a small moon of Saturn. And in this chemical downpour, you'd need more than an umbrella to protect you. The rules of Earth weather definitely don't apply here. But Earth and Titan are alike in a lot of ways. On Earth, we have a solid surface, a protective atmosphere, and plenty of water. All these things make life on our planet possible. There's really nowhere else quite like Earth anywhere in the solar system. But Titan comes close. Like Earth, it has a solid surface, and that's not all.
Titan has an atmosphere that's, in general, very similar to Earth's. In some ways, it's mainly nitrogen, like Earth's atmosphere. It's rich with organic material, also like Earth's atmosphere.
But similar isn't the same. Here on Earth, our atmosphere has a huge supply of water in it all the time, constantly evaporating and raining back down, like here on the Hawaiian island of Kauai.
Today we're on the slopes of Mount Waialeale, which is the cloud-shrouded mountain behind us. It rains over 40 feet a year here.
Earth's water cycle starts when warm, moist ocean air rises, forming clouds that eventually condense into rain. The rain falls back onto the land, where it eventually drains back into the ocean, starting the cycle again.
When water evaporates, it absorbs solar radiation. When water condenses, it releases all that energy into the atmosphere. And this transfer of heat helps to moderate conditions on Earth.
Earth's water stores as much as 80% of the sun's heat, helping keep our temperatures steady from the equator to the poles. Scientists theorize that Titan might have water or some other liquid that might produce a similar effect. And in 2004, when NASA's Cassini probe visited Saturn, it found some pretty good evidence to support that idea.
If you went to Titan and you were looking at the landscape, you would see something that in some ways would look almost familiar to you. You might see big mountains and valleys that were carved out by running liquids.
In fact, as Cassini flew past hazy Titan, its radar read the surface below. Scientists saw channels cutting across the surface, much like rivers on Earth do, some as long as 900 miles. The first strong evidence of liquid on Titan.
There are large bodies of liquid on the surface of Titan. Nowhere else in the solar system except for the Earth are there any large bodies of liquid.
Could water, the liquid that carves Earth's mountains and valleys, also be carving these features on Titan's surface? Or could it be something else? The problem is that Titan is too far away from the sun. If it was water, it would be frozen solid.
It's about minus 300 Fahrenheit on Titan, so things behave very differently on Titan than on Earth. Because it's so cold, methane, which is a gas on Earth, is a liquid on Titan.
One mystery solved. But just because methane is a liquid on Titan's surface doesn't mean it's part of a weather cycle like water on Earth. So how do we know that this methane also falls from Titan's sky? That answer is shrouded in mystery, literally.
Titan is completely covered in a thick haze of smog particles, like a very, very bad day in Los Angeles.
Despite the haze, the Cassini probe once again revealed the answer.
We can see the upper clouds, and we can see evidence for rainfall because the clouds drop very precipitously. We hypothesize that we're seeing the effects of rainfall.
Methane rainfall.
We think that Titan has methane monsoons, so we think that sometimes Titan has a lot of rain that is able to carve rivers and leave large fluvial deposits on the surface.
Cassini's radar imaging also revealed large methane seas on Titan's surface.
If you have liquid methane on the surface, in a lake, for example, that methane can evaporate off and become methane gas in the atmosphere. So you have kind of a cycling of methane between liquid phase and gaseous phase and between the surface and the atmosphere. That's very similar to the water cycle that occurs on the Earth.
But methane is a flammable gas. So why isn't Titan on fire?
For any combustion, you need two things. You need both a fuel, which methane is, but you also need oxygen. And on Titan, you lack the oxygen. So the whole thing is basically a big fuel canister, but there's no oxygen with which to burn it, and so it's all very stable.
If it were cold enough here on Earth to produce methane rain, the oxygen in our atmosphere would create a worldwide firestorm. Luckily for us, that can't happen. Titan's methane cycle makes it both alien and familiar to us.
To me, Titan is very exciting because all the materials are so different, and yet these processes produce very similar landscapes to what we see on Earth.
Titan proves that where alien weather is concerned, looks can be deceiving. On Jupiter, it's all about size. Drop the great red spot onto our world, and it makes even our worst hurricanes look like a breeze. This is the biggest and oldest storm in the solar system, and Jupiter's most famous feature. It even has its own name, the Great Red Spot.
It's about 2 or 3 times the size of the Earth, which makes it the mother of all storms.
We've known about the Great Red Spot in Jupiter's southern hemisphere for more than 300 years.
When Galileo invented the telescope, within a few tens of years, people had seen the Great Red Spot, and it's still there.
Familiar yet mysterious. Nobody knows how the Great Red Spot formed. But scientists are finally probing below Jupiter's cloud tops to uncover more about this enormous alien storm. The storm is powerful. With wind speeds of 300 miles per hour, it rises miles above the surrounding clouds. On Earth, we have storms that seem similar, though smaller and milder. Hurricanes. Also known as cyclones or typhoons, depending on where they form. They're our most destructive weather systems. But is there more than just a passing resemblance between Earth's cyclones and Jupiter's red spot?
When you look at the Earth from space at a hurricane, it's this big swirling pattern. It's round, it rotates. Jupiter's big storms look big and round and cloudy, and they rotate. But there the similarity ends.
In a hurricane, there is an internal core, which is called the eye of the tropical cyclone. And that's a region of very calm winds and no clouds. And usually has a size of about 10, 20 kilometers in diameter. And then away from the eye, there is the eye wall. Those are really cloudy regions with a lot of rain. And as you move outward, there is a whole region of about a couple of 100 kilometers with very, very strong winds and very strong rain.
Hurricanes draw power from heat in our oceans. But Jupiter has no oceans, and the sun isn't close enough to power a storm as big as the Great Red Spot. So where does it get its strength? Part of the answer is Jupiter's size. It's the largest planet in the solar system, almost as big as all the other planets combined. This mass generates a very strong gravitational pull, which in turn creates interior heat that rises to the surface. Another piece of the puzzle may be Jupiter's hypersonic rotation. Despite being much larger than Earth, Jupiter's day lasts only 10 hours. In other words, it spins incredibly fast. Could energy from this dizzying spin feed the Great Red Spot?
The weather is really dominated by this fast spin. There's shearing between different latitudes, and that shearing, plus a lot of heat that comes up from the interior of this very massive object, 290 times the mass of the Earth, leads to very violent storms.
Both Jupiter's and Earth's storms spin around in a familiar spiral shape. On Earth, it's because of an effect called the Coriolis force.
I'm sitting at the North Pole, and I want to throw a ball down to a friend who's in Los Angeles. And so if I threw the ball in that direction, the Earth rotates, and the ball will end up in the middle of the Pacific rather than in Los Angeles. So it's like if the trajectory was deflected to its right. And that's what we call the Coriolis force.
This force spins storms clockwise in our southern hemisphere. But there is a stark difference between Earth and Jupiter. The Great Red Spot is in Jupiter's southern hemisphere, and yet it spins counterclockwise. This is because of some other powerful winds.
It's bounded by jets, which are moving in opposite directions. And so like a cog between two conveyor belts, they're just feeding energy and momentum into the system.
Jupiter's complex jet streams spin the storm into organized chaos. But the greatest difference between Jupiter's red spot and our storms may be Earth's solid surface. Once a hurricane hits land, it comes apart pretty fast.
Where they come over land or over mountains, their behavior is very different from where they form over the oceans, and over warm oceans in particular, where we get hurricanes. And on Jupiter, there's obviously no solid surface.
With no land mass to stop it, the Great Red Spot just keeps on spinning and spinning and spinning. Scientists hope to learn more about our weather by continuing to study the storm.
On Earth, there's a limit to how far ahead you can predict the weather. On Jupiter, we can forecast where the red spot is going to be months in advance. It's practical value to understand what makes weather on Earth so unpredictable, and aspects of the weather on Jupiter are much more predictable.
Unpredictable or not, Earth's weather never gets as violent as on Jupiter. That's lucky for us, because if we shrank the Great Red Spot down to fit on Earth, we'd be in for disaster.
On the Earth, we go up to Category 5 hurricanes, nothing but Category 10 hurricane here. Not much would be left.
Alien storms are vastly different everywhere you go in our solar system. Even our next-door neighbor, Venus. They say we're sister planets. Lucky the resemblance doesn't include weather. Otherwise, we'd get seriously burned. Venus may be our nearest neighbor, but somehow its weather is radically different from ours. The second planet from the Sun is a cross between a toxic waste dump and Death Valley, but even worse.
So it's almost a planetary definition of hell.
The temperature is 900 degrees Fahrenheit. The pressure on the surface is the same as half a mile below the Earth's ocean. And if that's not enough, the upper atmosphere of Venus is choked with sulfuric acid clouds and winds clocked at 250 miles an hour.
To get a comparison for Venus, the best thing to do is climb inside of your oven and crank it up. And then in terms of pressure, you're talking about deep sea diving. It's like nothing. There's nothing comparable on the Earth. It's just a very, very extreme object.
On Venus, there's just no escaping the heat.
If you built up a hot spot on Venus, the massive atmosphere would just carry that heat away and spread it around.
But Venus shines so brightly in the night sky because its thick clouds reflect almost all the sunlight it receives. In fact, some early scientists assumed Venus would have moderate Earth-like temperatures.
When we went by Venus in 1962 with a spacecraft, we thought we would find a surface at 90 degrees Fahrenheit, sort of like Miami, Florida.
We were dead wrong. Something else must be at work on Venus. But what? So why doesn't Venus cool off the same way Earth does?
On the Earth, for example, we have sunlight coming in, hitting the surface of the Earth. Earth warms up a little bit, but the oxygen and the nitrogen in the atmosphere don't impede the light, so when it gets released out in the infrared, it goes right through the atmosphere and leaves and goes into space.
But on Venus, the atmosphere is 97% carbon dioxide, giving a whole new meaning to the greenhouse effect.
It becomes very, very hard for the surface to get its energy out.
So Venus really taught us a lesson, that if you have a blanketing gas, a greenhouse gas, it can warm up the atmosphere tremendously.
But why does Venus have so much more CO2 in its atmosphere than Earth? The two have much in common. They're even called sister planets. They're almost the same size, have roughly the same amount of carbon, and billions of years ago, both had lots of water. But eons ago, their paths mysteriously diverged. But Saturn also hides its lightning within thick, choking clouds of ammonia.
It's probably 100 kilometers down that the lightning is happening, and that complicates seeing the lightning flashes.
But the lightning is there, and scientists know it because they've heard it. Radio wave detectors on the Cassini orbiter have recorded the sound of Saturn's lightning.
We can hear the static of lightning just as you could with an AM radio going down the highway on Earth.
And this static reveals the power of the lightning that we can't see.
You can measure the energy in those radio waves and compare it with the energy that your radio picks up when there's a thunderstorm around on Earth. And the Saturn ones are big. They're more powerful, maybe 100 times.
And Earth's lightning can help scientists understand how storms work on Saturn. Within Earth's storm clouds, just like in Saturn's, updrafts drive moisture higher, causing ice to form. These ice crystals rub against each other, take on a positive charge, and become attracted to negatively charged water droplets lower in the cloud. This sets the stage for a potentially powerful discharge of energy.
Once you get that charge separation that builds up so intensely that some theorize that it can be as strong as 100 million volts, that the cloud then must release that energy.
On Saturn, the same thing happens on a much larger scale. In fact, the lightning is 100 times stronger than Earth's. That's a staggering 10 billion volts of electricity. Thunderstorms in Saturn's southern hemisphere span thousands of miles and can last as long as a month. But scientists aren't sure what makes Saturn's storms bigger and longer lasting. It could be Saturn's supersaturated atmosphere.
Probably the fact that there's more water in the atmosphere, pound for pound, on Saturn makes the storms bigger.
More water droplets means more friction, which means bigger lightning bolts. But energy emerging from the planet may also contribute to the power in Saturn's thunderstorms.
It turns out that where Lightning Alley is on Saturn, is a place where the winds are flowing the slowest. If you go deep down in the atmosphere, you'll see the same winds as you do up high. It's a place where the energy being released deep down below can make it on up to the upper atmosphere without being sheared apart, and allows storm systems to be organized.
Earth's atmosphere isn't built that way. So, as violent as our storms get, they're nothing compared to the systems on Saturn. Even a run-of-the-mill mega thunderstorm on Saturn would devastate us here.
A Saturn-sized thunderstorm on the Earth would mean a thunderstorm that grows to cover all of North America and presumably has very strong winds and rain. This is something that's unprecedented on the Earth.
Saturn's hyper-violent thunderstorms are proof that our planetary neighbors have weather far more ferocious than ours. But the laws of physics that create Saturn's storms are the same laws that create our own weather. Massive dust storms, unrelenting winds, killer lightning, powerful hurricanes, and searing heat.
Walked into a Las Vegas TV station and gave a remarkable interview. He said that he'd worked out in the Nevada desert at a top-secret facility known as Area 51. He said he worked on a highly classified project, reverse engineering recovered alien spacecraft. His story was a worldwide sensation, and Area 51 became a household name, synonymous with UFOs, secret projects, and little green men. And yet, neither the US government nor its military have ever denied his claims, and they still don't officially confirm that Area 51 exists, despite satellite photos proving it does. Many dismiss Bob Lazar as a fantasist, and yet others see him as a whistleblower, exposing a government cover-up of UFOs and alien contact.
A once-secret airbase in the Nevada desert is marking an unofficial anniversary today.
Area 51 was one of the most secretive places on the planet, but that anonymity vanished forever because of what happened 25 years ago. A controversial electronics whiz told a fantastic tale during a TV interview, and the story still reverberates today.
The I-Team's George Knapp played a part in what became an international sensation. He's here with an update.
Setting the stage, Dave, you might not know this, but 25 years ago, a young anchorwoman named Paula Francis and I were prepping for the 5 o'clock news when we learned that our scheduled live interview had canceled. We placed a call to aviator John Lear to ask if he could get a friend of his to fill the spot, a guy who reportedly worked out near Area 51 and had seen flying saucers out there. It sounded outrageous at the time, but that interview with Bob Lazar turned Area 51 upside down. We coaxed a reluctant Lazar into returning to Las Vegas to talk about it.
I don't know. Sometimes I really do regret it, and I almost feel like apologizing to him, saying that, you know, I'm sorry I let things out. Can I have my job back?
My personal opinion, based on comments I've gotten from the Deputy Director for Science and Technology at CIA, would seem to indicate that Bob was perhaps an unwitting participant in a program designed to introduce someone with a technical background to some elements of the UFO research projects going on out at the test site.
I have no doubts that Lazar actually was in a place where top secret investigations were going on. I'm not sure about all the details that have emerged from his account, but he certainly gives me the impression that he was actually there.
Do I believe Bob Lazar? My answer to that is yes. And heck, it's going on 8 years that I've known him. His story has never changed. He wasn't in it for the publicity. He surely wasn't in it for the money. He lost everything he had. I believe he's totally sincere.
As far as I can tell, he's a bright guy who tells a great tale and who's told it often to people who have not checked on him, who accept the notion that, well, the government wiped his slate clean.
Basically, I think he had an experience. I think he saw some things that shocked him, was subject to some conditions and experiences that were very unnerving to him and very profound.
He said, you would love to see what's out there because it's like beyond science fiction. He said, and I wish I could talk to you about it, but I can't. And that's as close as he ever got to telling me anything that happened out there.
You'll find many people who have seen these discs. Question is, where do they come from? Bob Lazar may be one of the few people who can tell us that they're from somewhere else.
I've no doubt that there's a relatively small number of people within the intelligence, military intelligence and scientific and technical intelligence community who are aware of what's going on, and an even smaller group who are actually organizing top secret research into this phenomenon.
There's been an operating airbase out at the location known as Area 51 since the 1950s, when it was home to the CIA's top secret SR-71 Blackbird spy plane. Then in the 1970s, it became the test flight center for the F-117 stealth fighter and the B-2 stealth bomber.
It's fairly public knowledge that we have a super secret facility in the mountains in northern Nevada, referred to as Groom Lake, Area 51 of the Nellis Air Force Base test range. It's also been referred to as Dreamland. This is an area that has been known but officially denied for many decades. All of our super secret aircraft have been developed and test flown out in this particular area. So it only makes sense that if you have something as sophisticated as a flying saucer and the related technology to that, that would certainly be one of the prime locations you'd want to go.
What you see is an ordinary looking Air Force base. It's nothing to write home about, but because the government won't talk about it, everyone wants to see it. The military has never said there are no UFOs. It's never directly denied any of the Area 51 stories. It would have been so simple when these claims came out, these Papoose Lake claims, for the military to simply say, look, we have nothing there. They could take a few reporters to this area and show them. Nothing there. The military hasn't done it. The military has stonewalled. It has remained silent. And that's the most damning thing that they can do.
Area 51 to this day is not acknowledged. That is to say, the Air Force does not admit that it exists. This status has been maintained very carefully, particularly in the last few years. The puzzle is that the base has clearly been very active for quite a while, and you can see that there are about 700 to 1,000 people traveling from Las Vegas every day. So essentially the bulk of what has gone on there in the last 10 years has not emerged from the black.
This airplane the program was terminated. The airplanes were put in mothballs for 20 years before they admitted the existence of the aircraft. There's programs that they're working on today that are 50 years ahead of anything that you and I can even conceive of, and that we may never, may never see the light of day.
Would you say it's America's most top secret military base?
As far as an operational test facility, it's probably the most secret test facility in the free world, yes.
So there is no question that the facility is there. The government has said very little in the past about it. Now, the real question, I suppose, is are there any flying saucers out there?
No one had associated flying saucers with Area 51 until Bob Lazar's interview hit television screens around the world. He said that he worked at an underground facility called S4. The top secret project was codenamed Galileo.
They would call it a specific time. For instance, the operator would say, "Mr. Lazar, it's now 4:15 a.m. We expect you to be at McCarran Airport at 4:45. Your plane will be leaving at such and such time." I'd drive there, check in, board the plane, and the plane would fly out to Groom Lake. It would land there. I'd get off the plane and wait, and there would be a bus to take me and whoever else was going to S4, Papoose Lake, which is about 15 miles south of there, and then I would check in at S4.
Tell me about how you felt on your very first trip out.
The first trip out there, it was actually very exciting because it seemed so cloak and dagger to me, especially after I got in the bus with the blacked out windows. I kind of thought that was neat. Drove out to the site, and then it was checked in, guards walking around with guns, and I was sure what I was working on was going to be pretty fascinating.
He says that within a few days of working out at S4, he was shown an actual flying disc in one of the hangars.
When I was brought in by bus, and for the first time, one of the hangar doors, the one on the end, was open. The bus drove up and we stopped there, and clear as day in the hangar, taking up almost all the hangar, was the disc. Looked like something right out of a science fiction movie. And as I walked in there, I thought, well, this is the new advanced aircraft we've been working on, and this is why people keep seeing flying saucers, because it's ours and we've just been testing it probably for all these years.
And what color and size was it?
It was a dull stainless steel, pewter gray, very unimpressive color-wise. About 52.8 feet in diameter and about 16 feet high.
So was it actually a recovered craft that you were working on, or was it one that scientists had built as a mock-up of a recovered craft?
Well, whether it was recovered, given, or what, it was not built as a mock-up. It was an alien craft built on another world. There was absolutely no doubt about that.
Lazar claims that he was one of only 22 people who had something called majestic clearance to work on the craft itself.
The whole aim of the project was to take these craft, or the one in particular that I was working on, and try and duplicate its systems and subsystems with earthly materials. The work that I did basically entailed back engineering the power and propulsion system, and I opted to start with the power, the reactor that ran the craft.
I knew immediately if his credentials could be verified, if even part of his story could be verified, it'd be one tremendous expose.
George Knapp was a long-standing TV reporter. He'd heard enough of the UFO rumors over the years to appreciate how big a scoop this could be if Lazar was telling the truth.
He gave me information about his background, educational background and employment background. I started with his claim to have worked at Los Alamos Lab. We went to Los Alamos and got nothing even close to cooperation. They wouldn't respond to our phone calls. They say, we have no information on Bob Lazar. There's nothing in the files. I said, are you sure now? No, nothing in the files. I showed them the phone book entry that Bob had kept that said he was there. I showed him the newspaper article that showed that he was there. Basically, Los Alamos Lab tried to thwart me at every step. Were completely uncooperative in trying to get information about Bob, and I found that to be the case at every step of the way in trying to verify his background.
Thursday, 12:37 p.m.
Former NASA mission specialist Bob Exler had heard about Area 51 and Groom Lake when he worked on the Apollo and Space Shuttle projects. He was intrigued by Lazar's claims and started to investigate.
I did a variety of research relative to Bob Lazar. I actually met him. I obtained a copy of his what they call a W-2 form, which is one of the IRS documents associated with pay. His particular form indicated that he worked for the U.S. Department of Naval Intelligence. They informed me that it was a genuine document. It was not something that had been fabricated. There were a variety of numbers, contract numbers and so forth issued on the document, which I was able to research, again finding that these were highly classified numbers. In fact, Internal Revenue Service ran into a brick wall when it came to trying to track down the actual employer associated with the document. And then again, with the Social Security Administration, we found that Bob Lazar's records had in fact been bleached clean. There was nothing there, in spite of the fact that the document clearly indicated that Social Security taxes had been taken out of his pay.
Not everyone who's researched Bob Lazar believes his claims. Stanton Friedman is one of the most respected authors in the UFO field today. He's a former nuclear physicist with top secret clearance and has many friends and contacts in the Black Project world.
I've looked at considerable depth into Bob Lazar's claims, both about himself and about propulsion system. Those are fairly elaborate claims. I've talked to the schools that he claims to have received degrees from. I've checked on his high school record. I talked to Los Alamos Lab, where he was supposedly a scientist and so forth. I have come up totally empty. Now, when a guy lies like that, you get very wary. And, you know, it has all the trimmings, his story, of a Walter Mitty story. Somebody whose imagination was, you know, stronger, brighter, faster than anybody else. I don't doubt that he did some work at Los Alamos and other places. He's clever. He drives a jet-powered car, fixes radiation detectors. So he may have performed some service, but I can find no reason to think that he worked out there on a flying saucer.
I mean, I had to wonder whether this guy was making this stuff up, but then I see the phone book and I see the newspaper article, and I talk to people who worked with Bob at the lab and who said, in fact, that he did work on classified projects, yet no one can find any records of his background.
The people that I worked with, colleagues, the people I went to school with, obviously knew I was there, and people at Los Alamos, I was friends with, and people that worked under me and alongside of me knew I was there and, you know, cooperate what was going on. But, you know, officially, it's very difficult to get information for the people in charge.
To further prove his claims, Lazar agreed to take a polygraph test, which he passed.
The thing that is interesting about polygraph is that if you're embellishing or if you don't completely believe what you're saying, it is very, very easy to detect. All it really will tell you is that the individual believes with 100% conviction that what he's reporting is exactly as he recalls and as he believes it to be. And that clearly was the case with Bob Lazar. Now, could his perception have been a bit askew? Yes, that's possible, but he clearly wasn't lying.
I think Bob is even open to the possibility that perhaps he had been used in some sort of misinformation or disinformation campaign. I mean, look at him. He has a pirate flag floating on his house. He races jet cars. He likes fast women. He likes guns. He's technically capable, so in that sense, he may be perfect for this kind of a program. Technically capable, scientifically knowledgeable, and yet completely discreditable at a moment's notice. If you wanted to test public reaction to a story about Area 51 and then suddenly discredit it afterwards, Bob may have been the most qualified person in the country.
Lazar says that on one occasion he was escorted into the flying disc that he saw in the hangar to analyze its propulsion system.
It was obviously made to be piloted by something smaller than the average human being, very cramped in there.
What were the size of these seats that were in there?
The seats were very small. I'd say about 1/3 to 1/4 the size of a normal human seat. A lot of people say, boy, it must have been exciting to go in there, and I always say it wasn't. It was a very ominous feeling. I know it sounds silly, but it's so unearthly in there.
You have spoken to someone who's actually seen a UFO under a tarpaulin at Area 51.
I have. I've spoken to several people who've seen UFOs or disc-shaped craft out there. There was a woman who was a secretary for a major defense contractor at the Nevada test site who worked on nuclear programs, who told me that she had sat in on conversations between military and civilian contractors at which the Roswell case had been discussed, at which it had been discussed taking some Roswell material to Area 51. The level of secrecy during those meetings was great. Afterward, they'd take the ribbons out of the typewriters she was typing on. She was ready to tell me about this, and I had this conversation with her on the phone. The next day after this conversation takes place, she's visited by two men who say that they work for the company she used to work for, reminding her that she is still under a security oath, told her, we know that you do a lot of traveling back and forth, a lot of long drives between Las Vegas and LA. We'd hate for something to happen to you or your family. No interview. I mean, it happened again and again and again. Same scenario.
Lazar says that in addition to being shown inside the disc, he actually saw it take off from the lake bed.
I was brought into the hangar for one of the short duration tests, and the craft was already outside on the lake bed, and that was pretty much of a marvelous sight. It's a huge thing. It's like seeing a house lift off the ground. You can't imagine the energy involved to do that. Because of the extremely high energy output and the fact that the outside of the craft is used as a conductor, that does ionize the air. And the crafts do, as a byproduct of this, glow at night, much like a fluorescent tube will light up. So, you know, bright, strange, jumping lights in the sky, that does explain that.
Would you categorically say there is no way that humans could have built the craft that you saw?
Absolutely. I will categorically deny that. Well, I don't know. How exactly should I put that? I guess I can just say it straight out. There is no way that any government on this earth could produce that craft, period. And I defy anyone to argue that point.
One of the big questions that's hung over this whole story is whether Lazar saw a man-made flying disc and not an alien spacecraft.
A lot of these craft which are being developed in secrecy in the United States are tested at night, and one can imagine that seen through kind of half-closed eyes, something like an F-117 stealth fighter or a B-2 bomber, side-on or front-on, would look remarkably like, say, a flying saucer or a UFO.
You see an F-117, or you see tacit blue, or you see a B-2. Particularly if you see it from some fairly unusual angle, you're going to...
I think for anyone who's been out into the western United States and seen the kind of place it is and let their imaginations run riot a bit, it is possible to imagine in these vast test areas technologies which are highly exotic, highly revolutionary, and would change the way we feel about science today. However, to say that that is alien science derived from beyond this world, I think is something which is just, it is unbelievable. It's too much to absorb.
Do you think that some of the truth certainly lies out there in the middle of the Nevada desert at Groom Lake?
I would expect that some of the truth may very well lie out in the desert near Groom Lake. It's the right place for some of it to be. It's isolated, it's under control, it's high security. I don't think we've yet scratched the surface on what's happening out there with regard to flying saucers.
According to Lazar, the craft that they were secretly testing out in the desert at night used an exotic anti-gravity propulsion system.
The reactor itself was an incredibly advanced system. This was an antimatter reactor. This is something we could only dream of having, something that could put out huge amounts of power that rivals several nuclear power plants running at capacity. What happens is a great gravity distortion is created, and you're essentially bending space toward the craft. The craft becomes part of that space, and then when the reactors, or when the gravity amplifiers are shut down, the craft is essentially where it was focused. It's a very difficult thing to grasp. It happens virtually instantaneously because of the fact that gravity distorts time. And if you're bending space and time along with it, when you wind back up in that place, you're there between the ticks of a clock.
Looking at nighttime video films out in the test site area, We've seen video of craft that were luminous, that would move across the sky as if it was skipping a stone across water, or sort of a sewing machine effect. What we see across the screen are a series of lights, of dashes of light, as the object moves from point A to point B. Therefore, we are seeing what you might call a shadow effect of the propulsion mechanism at work.
Bob Lazar is not the only person who's come forward and claimed to have worked out at the base on flying discs. Former US Marines test pilot Bill Uhouse worked out at Groom Lake and other top-secret locations for more than 40 years, working for the Pentagon and civilian contractors on a variety of highly classified projects, including, he says, a flying disc recovered from a crash in Kingman, Arizona in May 1953. He said that he'd been cleared to do this interview and to discuss certain information, but asked us not to show his face.
What were you actually working on out there?
One of the things I worked on was a flying disc simulator. It was designed in New Mexico by a separate staff that built it in parallel with the actual craft that they had intended to fly. The purpose of the simulator was to train pilots to fly this strange-looking craft. The simulator was a 10-meter round disc. The skin was made of boron composite material, not unlike that you see on the F-117.
How did you know how to build the simulator?
Essentially, there weren't any plans. The plans were generated as we constructed it. And there was a process there that took quite a while for us to even understand the concept way back in the 50s.
Uhouse says that Lazar did work at Area 51.
I think Bob is saying exactly what he knows, and I know a little bit about Bob from a different standpoint than a lot of the people know and what's been written about him, but Bob Lazar is not lying as far as his place and position and the activity he was involved with at the time, although some of it, you know, he couldn't recall, but there's a lot of reasons why Bob was hired, number one. You know, here's the thing. Take a guy like Bob, send him out there, you know, somebody said, you know, aliens, blah, 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 blah. You know, all of a sudden you're thinking about 9 alien crafts. You know, they may have not been 9 alien crafts.
Bravo 7014, contact departure, good day.
Do you believe that the government has recovered alien spacecraft?
I have no doubts whatsoever that the United States has actually recovered a number of extraterrestrial vehicles.
And what do they do with them?
I think that since 1947, there have been efforts to try and duplicate the technology, what is referred to as reverse engineering. And I don't know how far they've got, but some reports indicate that we've actually been test flying within a limited area actual alien vehicles or terrestrial vehicles, United States vehicles which have been made using alien technology.
Could these not just be military aircraft?
Well, I think it's quite possible some of them are military aircraft. I've heard from very reliable sources, including a leading specialist on unmanned aerial vehicles, that we have developed some disc-shaped platforms for aerial reconnaissance, some quite small, maybe some larger, which are being utilized by the Americans and have been built by the Americans.
That's 638-9 Delta, Las Vegas Tower, runway 19 left taxi, and evolution and hold traffic crossing downfield. Thank you, sir. 89 Delta.
Was it a hard secret to keep?
It was a virtually impossible secret to keep. But I did play by the rules, and it caused a lot of problems. It caused problems in my family life. I mean, imagine being married at the time, and you know, you get a call, you know, perhaps at night, and a strange voice on the phone. Okay, you disappear, you can't tell your wife who it was on the phone, where you're going, and you come back, you know, sometime early in the morning. I mean, what is she going to think?
Unaware of where he was going every day and being absent from home for long periods, Bob's relationship with his wife had deteriorated badly. This was seen as a potential security risk out at the base.
My wife was having an affair with someone else, so they viewed that as a potential emotional instability, and they no longer wanted me coming out until things were cleared up, either for it, you know, it to break up or heal or whatever. But they, that's what put the brakes on everything there.
And did they then stop calling you? Did you get very frustrated about that?
Yeah, then I began to wonder, boy, now they've given me all this information and everything's coming to a dead stop. What's going on? And that's when I began to be concerned, and then that's when I said, you know, now it's becoming important that some other people know what was going on.
As the silence turned from days to weeks, he finally decided to tell his wife and closest friends just what he'd been doing.
Were you aware of the security implications?
I was quite aware of what could happen, but I was also aware that these guys would go to any extent to keep their secret, and certainly not have someone that was on the inside running around. And I didn't think it was beyond them at all to make me disappear. Whether I mean, who knows? I know it sounds more like a movie, but I didn't think it was beyond their capability to kill me, just to stop the word from getting out.
Bob knew the test flight schedule for the discs and took his wife, his best friend Gene Huff, and another friend John Lear out to the desert near the base on a Wednesday night in March 1989.
Huh, it started coming in too. How far away can that thing pick up stuff if it's like overhead, like up in the air? Overhead, 300 miles. Jeez. So it could be any one of these guys. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that sounds military to me. Yeah, yeah. I bet you that's what this is. We got. Oh. You see that? Whoa. Yeah. What was that? Did you see that light just come on over there? I was looking right at it. Yeah. Here, let me check it out. Well, that was a shooting star. Right above it was a meteor too. No, there's a steady light. No, it's a steady light that just came on. Without any kind of. No, this one right over the range here. It wasn't there, and then I was looking right there, and it blinked on.
That's very bright. That's brighter than a star.
Yeah. Huh? Doesn't look like landing lights.
We got the light clear now, sir. We figured out what the problem is, and whatever that heading is, we're ready for it.
Huh. Interesting.
Okay, just change course.
Oh.
White light?
Yeah. Yeah, he's coming at us.
What did you see when you were out there?
Shortly after the flight time that I had recorded, white light came up. Well, not a white light, it was actually more of an amber light. Came up off the ground and hovered, and then began doing radical step maneuvers and darting from one side of the sky to the other, doing some impossible flight characteristics.
Do you think what you saw over the desert that night was an alien spacecraft?
Could I identify it as an ET craft without Bob's help? No, it would have been like I said, an elliptically shaped saucer doing, just doing moves that we're not capable of, but I could not say that, no, this wasn't some advanced Earth technology.
We got the line clear now, sir. We figured out what the problem is, and whatever that heading is, we're ready for it.
That would be a UFO. It's not blinking, it's not conforming to any sort of FAA lighting regulations, and there you're looking at it. That's like a typical UFO. If it was red, it would be real typical, because that's what most people report, is red lights like that are solid colored. I don't think that's landing lights, because it's curved already and we're still looking at it. Looks like he's curving back. Here he comes. That is a typical military UFO. There you go.
This small group went back to see 2 more Wednesday night flight tests, but on the 3rd trip they were spotted, caught and arrested. Bob was taken to Indian Springs Air Force Base and interrogated.
That interrogation was about as intense as you can possibly get, right stopping short of shooting me in the head.
What were they saying to you?
Everything up to and including that, we can absolutely kill you right now and there'd be no one looking for you at all. And I mean, everything. They threatened my wife, they threatened to kill my wife, they said they'd stop at nothing. They said they thought they made that very clear. They couldn't believe that I had taken anyone out there to show them that, much less left with information like the flight test data, and wanted to know what else I had said, who else I had told specifically. They were crazy. They really were. They were completely out of control.
After this interrogation at Indian Springs Air Force Base, Bob says that he was put under constant surveillance by security personnel. His phones were tapped, his movements were monitored, and he often found his car followed by military helicopters. Worried about what might happen to him and angry about how he was being treated, he decided to hit back and approached a local TV station about an interview.
I thought if I did an interview in silhouette, it would be kind of pushing back a bit. Or say, you guys stop, and not saying too much, but just saying enough just to let them know that I'm pushing back a bit and then lay off, or, it's going to get worse. It was really the only thing I could do.
Did you get any calls from the military or from former workers to say, what the hell are you doing?
Right after the interview aired, Dennis Mariani, who was my supervisor, called, and all he said was, do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now? And that was the end of the phone call. That was the last, well, really second to last communication I had with him. And, then I decided, well, that's it. And really just said everything that I had seen and done, and just wanted to divorce the entire situation.
Even now, more than 20 years later, the jury is still out on Bob Lazar and his claims about his work out at Groom Lake. It's a fascinating story which he's stuck to for more than 2 decades. And although many dismiss it as pure fantasy, the fact is that some of his credentials did check out. In addition, his former employers and even the tax authorities were caught covering up and refusing to release information on him. Why would they do that unless there was something to hide? One thing is for certain, if he is telling the truth, then we're all in for some shocking revelations in the decades to come.
Is the government ever going to say, you know, we've been lying to you for 40 or 50 years? Not a chance. I believe they'd stage an event that is much more like what they do. They'll take a big cargo plane or C-130 or something, take one of the old discs that they've, you know, analyzed time and time again and finished with, go up to a high altitude and push it out the back and then go fly away and say, oh, look, the first disc has crashed. You know, here's a flying saucer. I mean, I can almost guarantee that's the route they'd take.
There's nothing on their radars on the other.
Certainly there are a lot of questions about Bob's background that have not been satisfactorily answered. But there's too much that Bob knows, I think, that couldn't be explained any other way. He knows about the layout of the base. He knew about people who were involved in security checks. He knew when and where the test flights were going to take place because he took people out there 3 weeks in a row and they videotaped the tests. How did he know this stuff if he, in fact, did not have some kind of inside knowledge?
Do you think he'd make a good conduit of information? I mean, essentially a patsy. Yes, I do. I think it's quite likely that Lazar was set up, perhaps to knowing that he would give out this information.
It's likely to be a very long time before we discover what is actually being done out at Groom Lake now. They seem to wait anything from 15 to 20 years or more after something has been retired before they acknowledge its existence.
This airplane was designed almost 40 years ago. 40 years before that, the hottest thing flying was a Seversky P-35. 40 years before that, it was a balloon. So the technology has not stood still. So there's a very good possibility that we are looking at man-made transportation for the 21st century.
It's been so hopelessly polluted that I'm not sure we will ever get to the bottom of this story, and that's sad. I suspect that whatever was out there, discs, alien or not, had now been moved to some other location, and we may never find them again.
There might have been reason 40 years ago to believe that people couldn't handle the idea of alien visitation. I don't think that's true anymore. I think we're far more sophisticated now.
Do you regret having screwed up at S4 and taking your friends there and blowing your security cover because you could still be working on UFOs today?
Yes and no. Yes, at times I'd like to be able to go back in time and played along with the game and not have done anything, and perhaps to this day still be working on them, because I did feel privileged and it was fascinating work once you can get around all the you know, oppressive military security. And you know, maybe we would have stumbled on something, and yeah, it would have been fascinating.
The craft lifted off the ground, virtually noiseless, other than a small corona discharge on the bottom of the craft, indicating the presence of high voltage. That dissipated at about 30 feet, and it stood there completely silently, and moved over to the left, to the right, and sat back down. That was the entire test. However, that was an extremely impressive test. Maybe to someone that really knows little about science or anything, that wouldn't be a whole lot, but you have to realize this craft was about 52 feet in diameter. I don't know exactly how much it weighed, but it weighed a lot. And this was quite a scientific feat, to lift something completely silently, under control, and you know, perform a maneuver like that. The craft itself was, I assume it was metal. It was cold to the touch, that's why I say it was metal, but it was a brushed aluminum, actually just an unfinished stainless steel, not shiny finish to it. Had no seams. It was as if it was injection molded from one giant die, I was completely amazed. I can't really reflect on how it made me feel, but that was exciting.
How would you define gravity? Could you describe in layman's terms its basic principles for us?
Gravity is something difficult to explain because it's something that we essentially don't understand. It's just something that we can observe. Not much is really known about gravity. There are many theories about it, but they are just mainly theories. There's theories of gravitons, which allege that these subatomic particles that act like an attractive force like gravity that exchange between two pieces of matter. There's also a theory that gravity is a form of wave, an electromagnetic wave. But basically, gravity is a force. It's the attraction, it's the inherent property of matter to have gravity, a mutual attraction for each other. And it's basically all that we really know. Modern science, current science right now, identifies one gravity. It's one force in nature. Apparently, through research at S4 or information gained from one of the crafts they were researching there, it appears that there are two different forms of gravity. One form works on an atomic scale, on subatomic particles, holding pieces of matter, holding atoms themselves together. Another works on a larger scale, the scale we're most familiar with, holding planets in orbit, holding ourselves to the ground, things of that sort. Because it produces a gravitational field, I wouldn't say the craft is invisible during the day. However, if you're under the craft, because of the way the gravity is being used, gravity bends time and space, and it bends light. If you are looking underneath the craft or from certain vantage points, you will actually see what's above the craft. It's really a trick of the way light bends under the influence of gravity. For instance, we can see stars that are behind the sun, that are blocked from our view by the sun. The reason we can see them is because the sun is a tremendous gravitational field and it's bending the light around it where we can see the star. Space-time and gravity are all essentially interrelated. They all act on one another. Gravity bends space. Gravity also distorts time. When you vary one, you essentially vary the other two. If you, as an example, if you have a massive body, say a planet or something that's making a lot of gravity, producing a lot of gravitational waves, if you will, it distorts space. It bends space to it. It also slows down time. These things aren't theories. We know them to be true. We cannot artificially create this because we can't create gravity. But this is how they're all interrelated.
His burden made him with traveling at the speed of light.
There are several problems traveling at the speed of light. Just a couple of them are the fact that as your speed increases, so does your mass proportionally. In other words, the more energy you put in to go faster begins to slow you down by the fact that it's converted into mass. You have other problems like just traveling at such an extreme velocity, navigational problems, the fact that you might run into little tiny micrometeorites at speeds like this. They would undoubtedly destroy your craft. There's just a whole host of problems that you're going to run into just attempting to do something like that. Aside from the fact the amount of energy required to accelerate to the speed of light is horrendous.
Could you briefly describe Project Looking Glass and Project Sidekick for us?
Project Sidekick was another project going on with Galileo. Galileo was the project that I was involved in. Sidekick dealt with any of the weapon potential of the craft, whether or not the craft had a weapon in it or could it be used as a weapon, but it had something to do with some sort of particle beam configuration where the gravity generator can be used as a lens to focus a weapon of some sort, similar to the SDI device we were working on in the 80s, but with the potential of a focusing device using the gravity generator.
And Project Looking Glass?
Project Looking Glass dealt with the distortion, the fact that there's a time distortion, essentially looking back in time, and by that I do not mean looking back years ago to see the wagon train days. They're looking for distortions that are milliseconds in time, and what that was used for, I don't know, but that was just observing the time, the time distortion, time dilation phenomena of the craft in operation.
What is element 115? Is it found here on Earth, or is it strictly an extraterrestrial material?
115 is strictly an extraterrestrial material. It probably occurs naturally in some other places, maybe other star systems. You know, some people not familiar with science or chemistry say, well, that's ridiculous, all the elements occur on Earth, you know. But that's not true. There are elements on the periodic chart that aren't found on Earth. I believe the Heavy Ion Research Lab in Darmstadt, Germany, has reached element 112 recently. So 115 isn't that far away. And when they synthesize it, it's not like they're making a couple ounces of it. They're talking about 1 or 2 atoms of it. To make any usable quantity of a heavy element like that is virtually impossible. Element 115 is in the top of the reactor. And the base of the reactor apparently is a small, something similar to a cyclotron. It's a particle accelerator. A particle is accelerated to high speed and then deflected up a small tube, and it's aimed at the 115. This transmutes the 115, similar to the way we do that in a normal particle accelerator. This causes a reaction, a radiation emission that we really haven't seen before. It produces antimatter. This antimatter is guided down a tuned tube and reacts with a gas. When matter and antimatter react, they convert to 100% energy. This energy is converted, heat energy, is converted to electrical power in the reactor itself. This is done through a thermoelectric converter. And this electrical power is used to power other subsystems on the craft, though there is no wiring, you know, as we would know it. Also, that's almost a byproduct of the reactor. The reactor also sets up a gravitational wave from the 115 being bombarded. This gravitational wave is present at the top of the reactor and is essentially guided in the same way microwaves are guided, through tuned tubes. And this goes to their amplifying cavities and through the projectors that are in the bottom of the craft.
With the gravity generators running, is there thermal radiation danger to the crew?
There is no thermal radiation while the reactor is running. The thermionic generator is 100% efficient, which is in violation of the first law of thermodynamics. But in fact, it works. Element 115 is stable. And for those familiar with chemistry, we know that elements with higher atomic numbers have shorter and shorter half-lives. However, when you reach a certain point, they call it the island of stability. There is a place, and we've theorized this for a long time. Somewhere around 114 to 116, there should be an area in there where the nucleus of the atom is geometrically stable, with protons and neutrons, where it no longer decays. It's not radioactive. 115 is, in fact, this element. In fact, it does occur again somewhere around element 247. Of course, you know, we're nowhere near synthesizing that. We can only, you know, predict things like that. But that's where 115 is.
Did they, the aliens, give us element 115 in large quantities?
Whether or not it was given to us, I can't answer that question. However, I was told that we have 500 pounds by one of my co-workers. How it was obtained and, you know, where exactly it came from, I don't know. Whether it came in one of the crafts or, you know, it was separate cargo somewhere. Anyone can speculate, but I was told that was the figure.
You were able to get away with a sample of element 115. How much did you get away with?
No comment.
Several nighttime test flights, unofficially, while off the base. What did you see?
The test flights I saw off the base, actually the best test flight was witnessed by my friends who I had brought out there. At the exact moment the craft was hopping around and doing some really impressive maneuvers, I had turned around and I think was looking for the video camera or something to that effect, but I missed some of the most impressive maneuvers. But the craft was similar to what was done before that I had seen close up, other than the fact that it went above the mountain range, moved a much greater distance at a much higher rate of speed.
How were you able to find out about the test flight schedules?
The test flight schedules were told to me, specifically because I was probably going to have to be present during those times. And at that time, the test flights were taking place on Wednesday nights. And from what they said, that was because that was statistically the least amount of traffic in the area. And that's all that they were concerned about.
Does the propulsion system release any sort of discharge or exhaust?
There was a high voltage discharge on the bottom of the craft, but as far as there being an exhaust, there was none.
Why did they appear as glowing balls of light in the night sky?
Well, that's kind of the same reason why a neon light or a fluorescent light lights up. What you're dealing with is a high energy source in essentially a gas atmosphere, oxygen, nitrogen. And when you apply enough energy to a gas molecule, they emit photons, they emit light. And I don't think it's anything, it's really a byproduct of how the craft operates. When it's emitting that much energy, the gas surrounding the craft emits light, the same reason why lightning is visible. You have a huge electrical discharge, and the gas emits light in the form of lightning bolt. If you were going to see one of these crafts at night operating, it would appear really as a glowing ball or just a bright light in the sky from a distance. Even close up, you'd see a glowing halo around it. This is typically what you'd see in your normal UFO sighting, if you've heard them a lot. However, keep in mind that lights in the sky are caused by much more common things than flying saucers.
Tell us a little more about the aurora you witnessed taking off out of Area 51.
It was a large craft, and the one glimpse I got of it was from the rear, and it had two huge square exhausts with vanes in them. And it was just, it sounded more like a rocket than a jet. I don't know. I even think he did mention that it was liquid methane powered, but there again, you know, working on the disk technology, I really could care less what was rolling around at Area 51, but it did catch my eye.
As a result of going public, have there been any attempts made on your life?
One day when I was getting on Interstate 15, driving down Charleston Boulevard, a car came up alongside of me, and I thought he was just trying to race me to get on the freeway. This was after I had left the project. It was a white, boxy-looking car. Exactly what make and model, I don't know. But I accelerated to get on the freeway to go fast, and there was a gunshot, and the back of the car was hit, and I skidded off into the median. And I stopped, and I was frightened, and I just stood there because I thought the guy was going to be alongside of me and just shoot me. I had nothing to do. I was essentially paralyzed with fear, and I waited there, and then nothing else happened. And do I know it was a government agent trying to kill me? No. Could it have been a drive-by shooting? Maybe. You know, so it wasn't, I mean, it was an attempt on my life, but by who specifically, I don't know. Though I was threatened before I had left. They threatened my wife's life and my life, so I can only put two and two together and say that they were kind of pissed at me.
In an earlier interview, you had mentioned that they had put a gun to your head. Tell us about that.
That was after we were caught out when I had the test flight schedule, and I brought some friends out to show them the disc test. We got caught out there, and the following day I was debriefed down at Indian Springs Air Force Base. And I was in the room with the security guards that caught us, my supervisor and some other people and some of the security personnel. Yeah, they were essentially grilling me about security and, you know, how could I possibly bring people out there, and I guess I wasn't as responsive as they would like, and they got in my face, and one of them pulled the sidearm out, you know, just pushed it against me.
Have you maintained any contacts with your colleagues out at S4?
No, I never heard from anyone other than for a very brief time after I left. Dennis, who was my supervisor, did try and make contact with me at the meeting place was the Union Plaza Hotel, and I took a friend of mine, Gene Huff, down there, and another friend, a former colleague and scientist from Los Alamos, and we saw him, but I also did recognize some security personnel walking around there from S4, so whether or not it was a setup or what was going on or he was trying to talk to me, we never found out, and we left. It just was a real strange situation. I never heard from him since.
As we enter the 21st century, how has your experience changed your beliefs?
Well, if you want to word the question, how are my opinions changed? I would say considerably. And before I was at S4, I was more or less one of the guys that thought, you know, all these government conspiracy and UFO buffs and things like that were complete lunatics. I even remember before I was involved there, a friend showed me a little newspaper clipping and said John Lear was giving a lecture who was touting that aliens from another world came to Earth and there's 70 different species, and I remember laughing on the phone that this guy had lost his mind. And I was also under the impression that, you know, boy, the government's all for the people, and they, you know, they're out here to protect us and all that. You know, after the experiences I had there, everything is completely turned around. You know, the government is doing everything but looking out for us. I mean, the only thing they're looking out is for themselves. You know, obviously the ET craft do exist. Something had to build them, so there must be aliens. And since there are, and the craft are there must be some sort of factory and an entire civilization somewhere. And if in fact that is true, and it apparently is, then there must be others. Actual crafts and technology from another world. And that's probably the most important event in history. It kind of moved from science fiction into reality in my mind, and it really just, I guess, opened my eyes. Let's go! Whether or not we can duplicate them. If we can understand what a device is or how something operates or what its physical makeup is, that's great. But if we can't duplicate it, it's useless to us. So there's really two phases to the project going on there. It's understanding what we're looking at, and then once we understand it, is can we duplicate it with earthly materials and earthly technology. And, you know, unless we've got a handle on both of them, all that technology is useless to us. And if it turns out we can't do that, all we have is one single prized possession that we have to take care of, and that's it.
After all that's been said and done, would you do this over again? What would you do differently?
I would probably have played along for a longer time. I would like to have known a little bit more about the technology, and probably kept quiet if I could have, and possibly never have said anything. I almost wish I had done that. You know, it's it's really only caused headaches and problems. But I believe if I was given the opportunity again to go back in time and redo it, I think I pretty much would have just shut up and gone along with the program. I would have much preferred that instead of the Navy or whoever it was that hand-picked a few renegade scientists here and there, that they turn it over to some more qualified people. Obviously, I was not the most qualified person on propulsion or field propulsion or anything of that sort. I was just some guy. I mean, they could have picked, I could have named 10 or 12 other guys that were more qualified than me. But, you know, if they turned it over to the scientific community and not just a couple guys here in the United States. I mean, you need a large group of people in a large lab to research what's going on there, not a little quiet installation. It's the security itself that prevents them from getting anywhere. I mean, they never do work hand in hand. You can't have a military mind. Science itself must communicate. You have to have a free exchange of ideas. That's how things progress. And when you clamp down on a security system like that, where you work in isolated groups and ideas cannot be exchanged, you don't get anywhere, and that's the problem they have.
What does the future hold for Bob Lazar?
Well, I'm not really involved in any of that stuff anymore. That's kind of put behind me. I have my own businesses that I work at, some computer graphics, some consultation, other technical jobs, radiation detectors, and a few other things like that. So really, I just go about my life, and that's, you know, something that happened that was fantastic, and it's over, but it's kind of hard to shake it loose. But eventually I will, and that'll be that. I think all the surveillance and everything stopped. I don't think anyone's bothering to monitor me. I've said everything that I know. It's been all over the place, so it's kind of a done deal. As far as whether or not there are any craft out there, I believe, you know, they were out and gone in probably the late '89, early '90, and the only thing people see now out there are, you know, either flares or planes coming into land, but that's about it.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Why in the world someone would invest such an amount of money, of effort, of mise-en-scène to put together a 23-minute film of this kind? It defies reason. It doesn't make sense.
I cannot relate these structures to abdominal contents. The liver, if it were the liver, should be over here to the right. I'm seeing a mass that I cannot readily explain. And I have great difficulty in correlating this with any human body that I have seen. As difficult as it is for me to say it, as reluctant as I am to say it, that what I have seen here does not appear to be a human being. What is this? I would prefer to say, for the time being, that it is humanoid. I'm not going to say it is from a distant planet. What planet? I don't know. But I cannot say that it is a member of the human race as you and I know the human race. I have never performed an autopsy on any body that even closely resembles the being that we see on this film. There are 6 fingers on each hand, and there are also 6 toes on each foot. Are either pathologists or they're surgeons who have done a fair number of autopsies. This supposedly was filmed in 1947, and while things haven't changed, we see some things that would have been expected at that time, such as the use of a handsaw in removing the skull cap. I should also like to point out that this kind of a rectangular-shaped, somewhat sunken tray was the kind that I recall being around many, many years ago. We don't see these things around very much today, if at all.
Aluminum in appearance. There were fragments of aircraft skin or whatever the thing was, and also some girders with pictures of hieroglyphic-like things on it. I took them to be owls, but who knows?
An owl statue
While said to merely personify wisdom, the symbol of the owl has often been described as a prominent symbol of the aforementioned Illuminati.
What does it mean? Sorry, I'm all touching you.
It means a lot of different things, but I mean, it's what's important to me. I don't think it's not really for other people to really know about. It's not really for other people to really know about.
Ye fools and priests! I spit upon your fire!
Stars don't move. Planets or anything that's like a planet does. So this is color-coded. This is what they saw on different nights. They were looking for one thing moving. They color-coded it to show that all these stars are staying still. This thing is moving. Our solar system is still terra incognita. It's full of surprises. This object is something that astronomers said shouldn't even be there. There's a whole other solar system beyond the planets that we know that are full of these things that are sort of planets, sort of comets. Some of them they call dwarf planets. That's what they're calling this one. What we're seeing is, we're seeing our neighborhood. We're seeing what's around us. And then the second part, we're seeing where we came from. We're seeing where we came from.
This doesn't add up. Yeah. We need to ask some other folks to take a look at this for us and tell us if we're crazy.
It's ancient core of a gas giant that was ejected out to the farthest reaches of the solar system thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. What does this tell us about our solar system?
Well, one thing it tells us is that we don't really understand it as well as we thought we did.